We are excited to spend the next 2 days and 2 mornings discussing opportunities and priorities we all face at this critical time in our state's history, also in our economic prosperity. At this time, last year, more than 100 of us were gathering at Sunday River for this very event. While the summit looks very different this year, I am continually aware of the kind of event that this and the conversations are very unique to Maine. As we talked about the other day, access to all levels of state legislature and business is critical and available in the state of Maine. Right about this time last year as well, the state had just released its 10-year state strategic plan. That document offers the same value and opportunities it did then. Our pathway through the pandemic will require growth, and the strategic plan, along with the economic recovery plan, will provide us with that trail map. Before we get into those discussions, I'd like to introduce Jim Cohen of Verrill and Mike Saxel of Main Street Solutions. They are today's exclusive premier sponsor. Join me in thanking them for their support of this program and the Maine State Chamber.
Good morning. I'm Jim Cohen, and I'm a partner with the Verrill Law Firm in Portland and Augusta. Verrill Dana and Main Street Solutions are once again honored to be key sponsors of this year's Legislative Summit, hosted by the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. Even though this year's summit is virtual, this annual event provides an important opportunity for Maine business leaders and Maine policymakers to come together in an open forum to discuss the many issues impacting our state. Verrill's relationship to the Maine State Chamber and the state of Maine is longstanding. Verrill was founded more than 150 years ago by a former teacher turned attorney from Oxford County. From these roots, we have grown to over 120 attorneys and government relations specialists across 7 states, including Maine, and we are proud to work with many of the businesses joining us today. Like us, Maine has changed greatly over the years. In recent years, Maine has been challenged by an aging workforce, climate change, an ongoing pandemic, and threats to our historic industries. However, Maine is confronting these challenges by focusing on new, thriving sectors, attracting and training new talent, and collaborating on innovative solutions to evolve our heritage industries. While we gather virtually for this year's summit, we hope that each of you takes the time to connect during and after the program, as collaboration is key to Maine's further growth and success.
Thanks, Jim. And thanks also for your long-standing service on the Maine State Chamber's Board of Directors. I'm Mike Saxel, Managing Principal of Main Street Solutions. We're honored to work with many of the businesses here joining us today. We're also honored to serve as your host in this summit and for many summits over the past 15 years. We sponsor this event each year because we believe it is the premier annual event for open dialogue between legislators, this Mills administration, and business leaders. This open dialogue fosters understanding and collaboration. We are pleased to announce that, in addition to our sponsorship this year, we'll also be providing an open bar at Sliders during and after the presentations, which is where the real work gets done. So cheers and enjoy the meeting.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Mike. Your support is very much appreciated by all of us at the State Chamber of Commerce. And yeah, we'll meet you at Sliders right after today's conclusion. I too want to add my words of welcome to what our chairman has offered all of the participants. It's a real pleasure to have you with us. We welcome you and we thank you for your participation. The Leadership Summit has been a program of the Maine State Chamber for over 20 years. It's a program that's very popular with our members, and it's one that we're all very proud to be able to offer. Its success is based on a pretty simple principle, particularly at this time. Think of it, it's when you come together, it's the beginning of something good. When you stay together through the thick and the thin of the issues and the challenges you face, represents progress. But when you work together, its success. That is why we bring together the business leaders, the legislative leaders, to talk about and discuss mutual areas of interest. We listen to each other, we learn from one another, we gain understanding of the various points of view that are so important. But most of all, it's our effort to build the relationships that we need to address the challenging issues, but also to come together, as we hope this will be the same as previous years, to find those priorities that we all agree upon so we can move our state forward. Yes, maybe and certainly the location has changed, and clearly the means of communication is a little different. But what hasn't changed is the purpose of Leadership Summit. So we thank you. We call your attention that the theme this year is really going to be strengthening and growing our economy. And you're going to find that the path to do that is interwoven with each panel. And what is that? It's our strategic plan. It's the work of the Economic Recovery Committee. It's the measures of growth. And you're going to hear more about that in our very first panel. But first, let's have a word from our sponsor, which happens to be the State Chamber of Commerce.
Hi, I'm Dana Connors, President of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. We have some exciting news to share with you. We have a live stream show that we're going to bring to you each and every week. On that show, we'll be discussing issues of importance to you. Maybe they're issues happening at the state capitol. Maybe they're on Main Street. Whatever they are, we are going to share them with you. So stay tuned. Check us out every Monday at 3 p.m. Go to our website, mainchamber.org. We'll see you then. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Ben Gilman, General Counsel for the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. This year, our Leadership Summit will kick off with a panel discussion on the state's 10-year strategic plan, measures of growth, and the work of the Economic Recovery Committee. Moderating this panel is the Maine State Chamber of Commerce Board Chair, Cliff Grime. Cliff?
Thanks, Ben. I'd like to welcome and introduce our panelists for this discussion. Commissioner Heather Johnson of the Maine Department of Economic and Community Development has been instrumental in developing and implementing the state's 10-year strategic plan. In 2019, the state embarked on its first strategic economic plan in 2 decades. This development strategy establishes 3 overarching goals, recommends 7 core strategies, and then outlines numerous concrete actions to achieve that growth. Laurie LaChance, president of Thomas College, served as co-chair of the Governor's Economic Recovery Committee and will speak to the committee's report and recommendations. The ERC followed the framework of the state's 10-year economic development strategy to deliver 8 transformational recommendations to grow Maine's economy and sustain Maine's people. So, welcome panelists. We appreciate your time this morning. You each are going to be addressing a segment that you have firsthand knowledge in, and we hope to hear from you regarding what the priorities are, what the overlay of the pandemic has had on some of these particular initiatives, and we hope that we get lots of questions towards the end of this from our attendees that can delve deeper into the subject matter at hand. So, Commissioner Johnson, I believe you're first in line, so the show is yours.
Great. Good morning. Thank you, Cliff. I appreciate that. And good morning, everyone. Thank you to the Maine Chamber for hosting this event and finding a creative solution to get us all together to talk about these really important issues and creating an opportunity for us to be able to work together last year, right, we were all together talking about the strategic plan. And at that point it was done, and we were talking about the importance of implementation. And quite honestly, much like many of you, over the course of the last year, we didn't make as much progress as we had intended because we had to shift a lot of our efforts and resources to pandemic management. So now we are kind of really, with the support of the Economic Recovery Committee, which Lori will talk more about, now are working forward toward recovery, which makes the implementation of the strategic plan even that much more important. I think what we found is pre-pandemic, we knew what we needed to focus on and wanted to focus on as a collective state. Mid and as we exit the pandemic, a lot of those challenges are the same. The baseline might have changed a little bit, but the content and the concepts are consistent. And so we think between the Economic Recovery Committee work and the strategic plan implementation, a really good roadmap to be able to work together to move forward. So as we start that work, we are forming 7 work streams, each of them aligned to the key strategies as part of the strategic plan, and they will select and prioritize key projects, keep milestones, look at where the work is happening, and help to try to engage nonprofits, businesses, academic institutions across the state to make sure that implementation happens locally and is really ingrained in the communities. One of the key elements of implementation of the strategic plan, and we talked a lot about this early on, is that it's not just about the administration. It's about all of us and a roadmap for all of us to be able to kind of work together. So we are excited to be able to now spend more time focusing on that. And we really think economic recovery isn't going back to where we were pre-pandemic, but economic recovery is catching up to the trajectory we had pictured.
Laurie, welcome.
Well, good morning. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, and particularly an honor to be on a panel with Heather and Yellow, 2 visionary and highly accomplished leaders who I have great respect for. My role today is to present the recommendations of the Economic Recovery Committee. As you all work together and plan towards the future of our state, I'm hopeful that all 3 of the documents being presented to you today will help you. Like any good strategic plan, Heather's work lays out a clear vision, a North Star, where we're headed. The work of the Economic Recovery Committee provides goals and strategies to get back on track and head towards that vision. And measures of growth measures our progress, keeps us honest. We evaluate how we're doing at getting back on track and how much success we're actually seeing. So my role to share the 8 recommendations, which I'll do in just a moment, 4 of which focus on sustaining Maine's people, and 4 of which focus on growing Maine's economy. But before I share that work, I want to give you 2 pieces of background information. The first is a very quick background of who the ERC is, what the charge was, and how we produced our recommendations. And that hopefully will answer for you the question of why should you trust these recommendations? Then I want to spend just a couple of minutes on my own background, not because it's that interesting or anything, but because I spent 3 decades prior to coming to the college forecasting and analyzing Maine's economy and a wide array of economic development measures. I'm now in my 9th year of running a small private college that serves the very heart of Maine. 60% of our students are first generation, close to 50% are Pell eligible, so they come from very humble roots. And as of this year, US News and World Report ranks us 7th in the Northeast for the upward social mobility of our graduates. So we are producing a workforce that feeds our economic growth. And I get to witness the transformative power of education every single day. And that, hopefully, when I give a little background, will answer your question or my question as to why I feel so strongly that the recommendations presented by the ERC are the right ones that will take our economy from survival to thriving. So the ERC, launched in May of 2020 by Governor Mills, we were only given three things: a charge, a team, and a due date. The charge was to build a bridge from the pandemic-ravaged economy to get back on track towards the vision of long-term sustainability and growth envisioned in the 10-year plan. We were given a team of 40 amazing leaders from every part of the state and many, many different industries and backgrounds. And we were given a due date of December 1st to try to figure this all out. So we had 7 months. The process is really important. Josh Broder and I, Josh from Tilson Technologies, we created a structure that empowered the people to come up with the ideas. It was not top down, it was bottom up. Maria Pavic and Tony Ronzio did much of the research and the writing, and there were 6 subcommittee chairs who were very, very well-known business leaders across the state who ran the subcommittees on education, innovation, and infrastructure. All ideas came up from these subcommittees. And what Josh and I saw as our role is pushing them to refine, to focus, to add clarity, to really have a monomaniacal focus so that the ideas would be as impactful as they could be. We broke our work into two parts. The first was to stabilize and support our economy and our people. The second, to sustain and grow, which was our real mission. But we very quickly learned that we were in such a free fall that nobody could focus on the long term till we addressed the near term needs and urgency. So on July 15th, we presented recommendations to stabilize the employer base and support our people. And our people were suffering at the time. We just couldn't move on to the future until we addressed that. We put forward to the governor an investment plan of $1.1 billion to focus on the essentials: public health, childcare, K-12 reopening, housing, direct grants to businesses, critical connectivity for remote learning and work. Again, we had to survive before we could thrive. She acted, and the administration acted on virtually all of those recommendations. And in the end of July, we moved to our longer term and true mission to come up with the 8 recommendations that would give you the right path forward. Background on me: I served as an economist for 3 decades prior to coming to the college. And I based my work and all of my analysis of policies on these ideas. First, the work of Michael Porter in The Competitive Advantage of Nations, that he found in a nutshell after studying the economies across the globe, that it is not your government structure, your economic structure, or even your natural resources that determine your success and prosperity as a nation or a region. It's the innovative capacity of your people. It's your support for the growth and creation of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial ventures. And it's your greatest success focusing on the heritage of your industries that you have intimate knowledge of. That's where you have the greatest potential for growth. In early 2000s, I was commissioned to do a report for the Brookings Institution that looked at 35 years of economic development history. And I found from that research over many, many gubernatorial terms that Maine has been a leader in policies and programs in many, many, many areas over the years, a national leader, sometimes an international leader. But we've limited our success because of the very attributes that we're so good at and known for, sometimes limit us. And those are: we are frugal, we are fair, we are humble, and we have a little tendency to jump to the next great idea. I call that the flavor of the month. What these tendencies have done for us, it doesn't mean we haven't accomplished great things. We have. But as we go forward, we need to consider some of these attributes and what they do. We're frugal, so we don't make the big bets, and sometimes we don't fully fund the initiatives to a level that would allow them to have optimal results. We're fair, so we take limited resources that we have and we try to share it, sometimes geographically with all kinds, sometimes it's across industries, but our outward impact is not as great as if we had focused those investments. We're humble. We don't tell people all the great things we're doing. We keep it to ourselves so people don't understand what an awesome place Maine is to be. Sometimes it's our very children that we forget to tell why they would want to stay and make their lives here. And sometimes we switch horses with the change of administrations or the change of legislators to move on to the next great idea rather than staying the course. Finally, in my lived experience of being CMP's economist and for 10 years, forecasting their revenues and sales, for 11 years serving 3 governors as a state economist and chair of the Revenue Forecast Committee, for 8 years heading MDF in Leadership Maine and Policy Leaders Academy, and now 9 years as a college president. I've grown to believe and understand with every ounce of my being that in a knowledge-based, technology-driven economy, the single greatest investment you can make in the future of this state is to invest in our people and bring each and every one to their greatest potential. For people to be moved to their greatest potential, they have to be healthy, educated, skilled, connected, accepted, and included, minimally. So moving to the recommendations, there's 8 of them. The first 4 are in growing Maine's economy, investing in innovation, entrepreneurship, talent development, and talent attraction. The next 4 are sustaining Maine's people. This underlies our success. Internet access, early care and education of our youngest people, housing, and addressing structural inequities. First, to growing Maine's economy, innovation. We must invest boldly, strategically, and consistently in next generation technology and innovation to grow our value-added economy. That means placing strategic bets, if you will, on growing the industries that we're good at and taking that knowledge and history to the next level of value added for the products and services that will lead to prosperity for our people and our entire economy. Entrepreneurship, the second recommendation. Supercharge the high growth entrepreneurship while sustaining Maine's vibrant and resilient small businesses. As you look at and study Maine's history, all of the big captains of industry in Maine started as small entrepreneurial ventures. LL Bean, we've read about that. We know their roots. Chinbro, Hannaford, IDEX, Wex. We can go on and on and on. We have to support entrepreneurs. They are our history, they are our present, and they are our future. We have to invest in talent development to unleash the potential of Maine's workforce by creating educational and opportunity training pathways for people of all experience levels to access careers in those high demand, higher paying jobs. And talent attraction. We don't physically have enough bodies of the right age, working age, to power this economy to our big, bold vision. We need to bring others in. We need to attract people to our state. That has to be a very thoughtful strategy that we employ with all force. As to sustaining Maine's people, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of need, people cannot thrive until their basic needs are met. So investing in this time in our people in particular for a knowledge-based economy, they have to be connected. Investment in internet access is critical. We need to ensure every Mainer has a high quality internet connection to support economic development, remote work, distance education, telehealth, and meaningful community connections. Early care and education supports. Reinforce and reimagine Maine's early care and education supports to ensure that parents can go to work with a peace of mind that their children are well cared for, safe, nurtured, and prepared to start kindergarten. Housing. We must invest in developing robust housing policies and programs that enable Maine people to live and raise their families near their work. Housing and health are integrally related. Health and education are integrally related to success, prosperity, and thriving. And last but certainly not least, we must address the structural inequities to make Maine a diverse, equitable, and inclusive state where all Mainers, all people in this state, reach their full and highest potential. That will lead our economy to the dream and the vision that we envision. I believe in Maine with every part of me, believes in us, our future. We can do this, but we do need to be bold. We need to be tenacious. We need to be strategic and focused. Thank you.
Very much. Inspiring words. Just a reminder for all of you that are watching this, if you do begin to develop questions, please enter those into your chat box that's on your screen, and we will take up those questions at the end of the presentation. Next, Yellow, welcome. We're anxious to hear from you as well.
Thank you. Good morning. Lori LaChance is a tough act to follow, not only as CEO of MDF, but on this panel. It's great to be part of this virtual gathering, and I do hope people are able to share, not quite the same way we would if we're together. I have to comment that it's just unbelievable to me that we've got a panel today with 2 Somerset County natives and a Piscataquis County native. You never see something like that happen. So the Upper Kennebec Valley, Maine Highlands, Rim counties represented strong here. And it's really a privilege to be part of that. I've got a few slides, which I think the folks at Headlight are going to get up on screen if they haven't already. I'm not sure I'm seeing the view that the audience is seeing. You'll see a lot of, there we go. You'll see so much synergy and alignment between what the 3 of us are talking about. Partly that's not surprising because measures of growth produced by the nonpartisan Maine Economic Growth Council. This is our 26th edition doing this over the years. The measures of growth themselves were part of the situational SWOT analysis that really informed the work of the 10-year economic strategy group, and of course feathered forward into the work of the Economic Recovery Committee. And so just quickly, and with data, I think I wanted to flash a few visuals because otherwise it's just so hard to grasp, I think, what I'm describing. But this vision, this high quality of life for all Maine people, has guided the work of the Growth Council and of MDF since inception. And so it would be difficult enough if we were working on increasing wages, if we were working on growing jobs, if we were working on keeping the business climate competitive, if we were working on skills and education. But if we do all those things and don't also have vibrant communities and a healthy environment, it wouldn't be worth it anyway. So unlike some of these report cards that come out where Maine's ranked, you get a B-, you get an A-, you get a D, and it's opaque as to what's behind it. Measures of growth this year, 29 metrics that really try to paint a holistic picture of these 3 areas. And within that, this year, roughly half of those metrics were losing ground against the benchmarks that we've set, and about half were holding steady or making progress. And the other thing that we do is that we do set those benchmarks against where do we want to go? Not just how do we stack up, looking backwards, but what would it take to move the needle for Maine on each of these 29 benchmarks so that we were either where we need to be in absolute terms as a state for a thriving economy, or we were at or exceeding some benchmark in terms of our New England competition, our national competition on each of these benchmarks. So much changed, and if you pull up this year's report, you'll see 8 additional pages of context. The pandemic recession that we're living through, more severe than anything we've ever experienced, and yet different. When do you have a recession where home sales, home prices, and construction jobs and building material sales actually go up? And yet some of our other industries and some of our frontline employees hit harder than ever in history of our economy. The racial justice challenge that exploded into the consciousness of all, if it had not already, last May with George Floyd. The uncertainty of just what we're dealing with and how it's going to turn. And then the context, as Heather and Lori talked about with the 10-year economic strategy and economic recovery. So even before the recession hit, the council was taking every step we could to reformat the measures of growth in some fairly subtle ways to line up to the 10-year economic strategy. You'll see it in the indicators we added. You'll see it in a few tweaks to the indicators, and you'll see it just in the organization and heading. So we tried to make it a crosswalk for you as leaders and policymakers and policy influencers to be able to tie to the work, as Lori said. What's new this year, we went from 27 to 29 indicators. We added an indicator on racial and ethnic income equity. The council asked us and our research team at MDF to say, look, we know we have a long road to travel to build an equitable economy. Where are we now? And I'll show you in a second that the answer is pretty stunning and not good. And we have a big gap to make up. And we added pre-K education. We've seen this magnified during the pandemic. And I think, you know, if anything, the trend lines and the challenges and opportunities for our state, I see in the data that the pandemic really exponentially magnified those things. It did not change them. It's accelerating certain trend lines. It's accelerating our reliance on digital technology and work and deliver from anywhere. And it's accelerating the interdependence of public health and the supports like early childhood and housing that Lori talked about. So that metric was on the drawing board. We tweaked some measures, and you might say, well, is this kind of insider baseball? Who cares whether you tweaked per capita income to wages? Well, this is one of the reasons that you care. Wages is the metric that's used in the 10-year economic development strategy, because wages tells us whether we're growing what we can pay people for the jobs that they're in now. There are huge parts of our economy that are not earned wages, especially, of course, Social Security and retirement. You can't really read maybe the details on screen here, but look at the red part of this graph. That is the personal current transfer receipts, those things that would include those retirement benefits and unemployment and government benefits. They went up 600% in the second quarter of 2020, while wages fell almost 30%. So that's why the difference between wages and total personal income in our state is so important. It was dramatically important in ways that we couldn't have even imagined in December of 2019 when we started tweaking these metrics. But what we want to do is figure out how fast we can grow back that green portion in terms of the true wages, even as ultimately there will be some cliff effect, no matter what happens with stimulus this year. Ultimately, whether it's next year or the year after, there'll be a cliff effect on that red section in terms of the unemployment benefits and the PPP and other programs. Gold stars this year, we have to focus on what's going right. Any well-run organization, any aspirational entity, whether it's the state of Maine or each of our companies, we have to really remind people, what are the assets? What is the calling card? How do we win? Pre-K education new this year, gold star. We have really risen above our national and New England peers. We have a long way to go, make no mistake, but the investments are beginning to show and to pay off, and we have to double down in that direction. Public safety, crime rates in Maine, just ridiculously off the charts low, even by comparison to the 10 best states in the country, let alone the average. We have to sell that. Air quality, best year in Maine history. Water quality, also good. Regeneration of Maine forests, which we track, also great. So, you know, how do we grow on what our strengths are as we build back better in the Maine economy? We have to not lose sight of that. Red flags this year, half a dozen of them. Racial and ethnic income equity that I mentioned. Workforce, which is a critical metric in the 10-year economic strategy. Are we going to have enough talent to drive this economy? Value added per worker. Are we going to support those workers with the training, education, innovation, and capital that they need to have more output in goods and services for every working Mainer? If we don't, we can't grow wages. R&D, Lori talked about Michael Porter and the innovative capacity of our people. At the end of the day, we've had periods before, whether it was 9/11 or something else, where we saw a disruption where the flight to safety, the value of the quality of life and community in Maine became suddenly an enhanced recognition, and we saw upticks of in-migration to our state. But it wasn't a step change for us, and it sometimes didn't even sustain itself. And I actually have come to believe, I think consonant with what Lori has preached this morning, that innovation, as loosely tracked here by R&D, which is just one component of innovation, that innovation is the reason. We have to have an innovative economy in Maine, building off the nodes of world-class excellence that we've seen. Think about our pandemic response without IDEX, without Abbott Labs, without the Jackson Lab, without Puritan Medical Products. Where would we be as a state? Where would we be as a country? So we need those innovative nodes every day to be part of the growth trajectory for our state. You can see on race and income equity a 38% gap between the per capita income for the average white Mainer and the average Mainer of color. There's a lot that feeds into that. The Growth Council isn't, the conduit for all the solutions, but we can hold ourselves up to this mirror, and we can hold ourselves accountable for saying, we have to make dramatic progress by pushing on the many levers that contribute to this gap in equity in the Maine economy, or we will not have an economy worth fighting for. Workforce, the vision of the economic development strategy team to offset all of the retirements that we're going to be seeing from the boomers, a negative 65,000 out of our workforce in boomer retirements, with 75,000 in new workers from a host of places, including workforce participation of people already here in our state. And here's how those two go together. If you want the quick interpretation on this, the tiny blue sliver is the proportion of population growth in Maine over the past decade that came from the demographic of white Mainers. The other 96% of net population growth in Maine over the past decade came exclusively from Mainers of color. So as we put together this challenge of equity in the economy, of this being an attractive place to work, move, and raise a family, no matter what your race, ethnicity, or skin color, and we put that together with our workforce and population challenge, the two are the same coin. Value added per worker, Maine is the lowest line on this chart. We've been for a long time, and we have to figure out, we can't wave a magic wand and grow wages without changing this dynamic. And as I said, it's connected to this other one where, again, Maine is the dotted line, which has been at the bottom of this comparative R&D chart. We're not going to change this overnight. We have to have the power of persistence, of building a glide path and chipping away as we build back better. And then finally this morning, cost of doing business. We had celebrated this a few years ago as being a gradual gold star, in that you can see the dark dotted line of Maine had been higher even before this chart, had been gradually converging with our regional competition. And indeed, at one point, we were the second lowest in New England in terms of cost of doing business. So we wanted to celebrate progress, heavily driven by progress in industrial energy prices. But we've kind of plateaued at a time where the region has continued to make a bit of improvement, and we're back to being middling to somewhat worse in New England. So we wanted to highlight this with a red flag this year as something we have to keep an eye on. We are a high-cost state in a high-cost region, but we need to moderate that gap so that we can really be an attractive place to put those innovative businesses. So I know I've covered a lot of ground here this morning. I look forward to the Q&A, and back to you, Cliff.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you all. Inspiring and really informative presentations. I'm sure we have a lot of questions. And so, Ben, I'm going to ask you maybe the first question.
Sure, thanks, Cliff. And just to remind folks that if you do have a question, to be sure to enter it in the chat box, and we'll get it out to the panel. But the first question we have is for Commissioner Johnson. And the question is, looking at the 10-year strategic plan, is there one thing or a couple things the business community could do to help advance the goals of the report?
Yeah, so thanks, Ben. A great question, and I appreciate the lead-in for help there. As we developed the report, I think there were a lot of places that people could see their own goals in the strategic plan. But I would say maybe the first place for all of us to start is this workforce opportunity. I think it can be a challenge. I think it can be an opportunity. Yellow talked about immigration. I think how we can all work together to embrace new members of our workforce, either people potentially who have never been part of the workforce that are joining the workforce, or people that are moving to Maine right now, how we integrate them into good jobs, how we look at career mapping and help drive aspirations and grow aspirations of Maine-based youth so that they can see all of the really interesting things that are going on in Maine and find kind of their space there. One of the key tenets of the strategic plan is that the workforce is really a continuum. You know, we tend to a lot of times talk about different parts of workforce as a piece or another piece. I think what the strategic plan intended to do, and I think supported by the ERC, is look at workforce as a continuum and really trying to help remove barriers and create opportunities for Maine workers to thrive in that space. So I would say that's really one. And the other one is really thinking about innovation. How do we work together to grow the innovative work that we're doing here? How do we think about diversifying our economy based on work that we're already good at, right? How do we as state government and legislators help support kind of diversification for businesses? How do we help make sure that workers are prepared for that diversification and ready to fill those roles effectively? I would say those two are really the big two, Ben, to start with, which is workforce. And I put workforce into one bucket, which is really about talent development and talent attraction. So there's a lot of work there that will go on, but also really focused on innovation and driving diversity. We've seen, right, as there are economic challenges and pandemics and other things that will come at us, the more diverse our economy is, the more stable it will be. And so we need to continue down that path. We have long-term innovation options from heritage industries that will create global climate solutions and other opportunities that will make us significantly more competitive as we go forward. So I think there are a lot of places. Certainly we look at connectivity. What we're all seeing is where and how and when you can conduct business today is a different question. And so connectivity continues to jump to the top of the list of important pieces of modern infrastructure. So I would say that's high on our list too, as areas to start.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next question.
So our next question kind of follows up on what Commissioner Johnson just said, but it's looking at the economic recovery report. And one of the key recommendations coming out of that report was the expansion of broadband here in the state of Maine, Maine being the most rural state in America with 63% of our population living outside the urban area. So Lori, with the Economic Recovery Committee, in the broadband expansion, can you expand on that a little bit in terms of some of the recommendations there?
Sure. Of course, the extension of broadband, and by extension, I don't mean just laying the fiber, but actually bringing it to the homes and businesses of the people fairly, equitably, affordably. It doesn't do any good to have that super highway at the end of your driveway if you can't access it. So the recommendations for internet access are very core to every part of our recommendations, because it enables our people to stay connected with their families, with their health care for telehealth, with their education of their children, and with working from home. So some of the things that were recommended as you peel back the onion of the overarching recommendation was to convene a public, private, and philanthropic stakeholders to map and prioritize and complete the program design for universal broadband. So again, this is the underlying infrastructure of the modern and the future economy, where roads and bridges used to do that, and airports and ports. It's not that those aren't important, but to fully participate in the modern economy, it's building out a system, making the investments in a strategic way that reach the largest numbers of people and businesses so they can take full advantage. So convening the leadership across all sectors and investing very, very in focused and strategic and thoughtful manner. And then advance digital equity and inclusion by increasing access to broadband, computers, mobile devices, and expanded digital literacy training for the historically underserved individuals and communities. We all know there are parts of Maine where you have to go basically, stand on 1 foot and on top of a tower somewhere to get a signal. That's not equal and it's not sustainable. So it's really, we have to create digital equity. So it's not just made available to the wealthier or advantaged populations of our state.
So there's a follow-up question for that, and it's for Commissioner Johnson, because broadband shows up in many reports, and it's a key aspect of the 10-year strategic plan as well. So Commissioner Johnson, I was hoping you could maybe dovetail what Lori said in the Economic Recovery Committee of some of the work the state's doing, but also the recommendations in the 10-year strategic plan surrounding broadband.
Lori's comments, I think what we see are really 3 key barriers to expansion. One is the infrastructure itself, one is affordability, and one is the ability of people to effectively use the technology to enter into modern access. So that could be economic access, it could be learning. We're certainly seeing distance learning take a very different meaning today. People are doing a lot of different telehealth work. One of the other opportunities this creates for us, right, is as we attract new people, new workforce coming to Maine, we attract new business and business expansion. In order to be competitive, you need to have modern connectivity. I don't know, the Jackson Labs folks will continually tell us that they can't keep a cell phone call between Bar Harbor and Portland, and that's on our main, highway. That's not really how commerce needs to get done. So we have a lot of work there to do, not just to talk about kind of connected landlines, but also to talk about attracting 5G and not getting behind in some of these other connectivity pieces. The good news for us, I think, is all of the additional technologies are based on a fiber backbone. So the more fiber density we have, the better off we'll be to encourage and attract additional connectivity. So you don't have to wait to get to the next generation. We can work our way through connecting people along the way to modern connectivity so that they have all of these kind of new options. So fully agree with Lori on the importance of broadband and connectivity, the importance of making sure everyone is connected and all businesses have that opportunity are high on the implementation components of the strategic plan.
If I could just follow up one question there. Obviously, the expansion of broadband could be quite daunting. Is there a group of stakeholders, providers, installers that you've engaged so that there is a plan, if funded, will accomplish what it is we're trying to achieve here?
So the Connect Maine Authority is a quasi-state entity that their whole mission is to expand connectivity. They have a board made up of a variety of people, telehealth experts, digital literacy experts, and others, as well as they continue to convene internet service providers and others to the table for communities as well, right? Communities play a really important role in this. Businesses play a really important role in how we move this forward. So I think that is one avenue. I think there are more opportunities. We also are looking at kind of a knowledge platform that would allow us to do things like mapping and understand where these technology holes are and more easily estimate what the cost to fill those would be and how structurally you would do it in a most efficient way. Without effective tools like that, we tend to go where we know there's a problem and where people are kind of actively working in partnerships with providers. But that isn't necessarily the most efficient way to build it out if you were building it from scratch. So I think we can utilize some modern tools to figure out the most cost-effective way to do this. It will also help us understand what these costs are and what the return on that cost is, right? There are models, financial models that will indicate when that return on that investment could come. And so all of those are important factors to doing this the most efficient way.
Ben, is there another question?
Yes, just to remind folks, if you do have a question, to please enter into the chat. But our next question that's been submitted surrounds the measures of growth report. And it's a two-part question for Yellow is, are we utilizing the data in the measures of growth report? And also within that, are we using the gold stars data? How are we utilizing those? And are we addressing the red flags within the report as well?
Thanks, great question. I think the manner in which measures of growth was used as a tool to inform from the foundation the work of the 10-year economic planning group back in the spring of 2019. Bruce Wagner did an amazing job orchestrating that entire process, including a real heavy data gathering phase, both quantitative and qualitative. And that's really what we see the Growth Council's original purpose being, to bring policy and systems change out of the data. And so the 10-year and the economic recovery work are two prime examples of that. One of our aspirations is to then build actionable work that transcends the electoral cycle. And that's easy to say and hard to do. So, like Lori said, hopefully we can provide accountability through measures of growth. So we do see it shaping the conversation. We see our data that we gather from others about sustainable forest lands in Maine, feeding heavily into the dialogue around both the importance of those forests to Maine's climate strategy and also the unbelievable, still unrealized opportunity for the next golden age of the bioeconomy, which is highlighted in the 10-year plan and highlighted in the work of For Maine, the Forest Opportunity Roadmap. So we see a lot of ways in which this work informs the big picture work of the strategy. It informs the work of groups like Maine Spark, who are trying to advance educational attainment in the workforce. It supports the drive of folks working on those nodes like Maine's forest economy. And it, I think, really transcendent for us at MDF and the Growth Council in general. Every single one of these issue areas and every single one of the indicators has a passionate constituency or advocacy group around it, but bringing the unusual voices, the less usual suspects to the table and saying, no, this is a transcendent economic issue for the state and not just an issue for those who are drawing a paycheck from that arena or are the direct beneficiaries of those investments in talent, innovation, and infrastructure. And finally, now with our heightened awareness around equity. So I think we can drive that. We hope that our work around equity will drive that dialogue in the state of what parts of that are because of systemic racism, policies that prevented Mainers of color from building skills and building wealth in the past, which we now have a responsibility to face and unwind. How much of it is educational opportunity in real time today? How much of it is implicit bias? So we hope our metrics both have already and will going forward really spark actionable discourse, but driven by data and not bias.
Yellow. Ben, next question.
Yeah, thank you, Yellow. And following up on that, our next question has to do with both the 10-year strategic plan and the economic recovery report. They both focus on growing our workforce, both in terms of skill and size. Commissioner Johnson and Lori, wondering if you can highlight some of the recommendations in order for us to make this happen in terms of growing the size of our workforce, but also growing the skills within that workforce as well.
Lori, why don't I start? Maybe you jump in. Does that work?
Sure.
Okay. So, I think these are such big work streams that there are a lot of pieces that can come through them. And so one of the things I think we're trying to do is be really practical about how we prioritize projects as part of these work streams. So how do we make sure that people are getting access to the programs they need? As an example, the Maine Community College has stood up programs that will allow, people to go from not having work to short-term training options to being able to access that first role for them. And then, ongoing training either can happen on the job site or back through the community college. And we've seen that work at places like Puritan over the course of the last year, where they needed to attract a significant number of workers to a new facility in Pittsfield. Those workers needed to be either brought into Pittsfield or people within a reasonable drive distance that maybe didn't have manufacturing experience or needed very specific pieces. They were able to partner with the Maine Workforce Investment Board, the Maine Community College system, Puritan, and our department to work through kind of what is the process to get people through the training they need and be ready and available to start work. So those are some really tangible actions. I would say in addition to that, we are seeing bigger picture pieces related to internships and apprenticeship growth for students. We're looking at CTEs and how do we help CTEs prepare students for great jobs that exist. The Maine Won't Wait climate solution has a lot of interesting options there for people in solar and HVAC and electricians. All of that work can be started at the CTEs and then furthered through their academic career. So there were a number of work streams there, but I think the real priority is how do we create this bridge and make it easy for businesses to find the employees they need and for employees and workers to find the opportunity that meets their needs and supports their living wage needs at home. What we see, right? Our businesses want to create really good jobs for people and want to be a real part of their community. And workers want to work really hard, develop a good product, and go home at the end of the day and be able to pay their bills. So creating that bridge to be able to make that a successful situation for both will be a key part of the execution of the strategic plan. Lori, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I would just add, having looked at the pipeline of developing a workforce for a while now, I want to point out our own human nature to search for the silver bullet. And frequently I am asked, or others are asked, this false dichotomy. What's most important? Do people need 4-year degrees or just training, or maybe 2-year degrees, and we want to place a value on one over another. But the answer is yes, we need all those things. Do we want to invest in retraining adults, or do we want to focus on better preparing the young population, the traditional college age? The answer is yes. Do you want to invest in giving supports and special education to our K through 12 system students? Or do you want to move investment into early childhood when 90% of the brain develops? The answer is yes. We can't pick one over another. We have to make sure we're addressing the pipeline all the way along and invest in a focused manner to help, again, each individual, regardless of what their age is, what their background is, what their experience is to date. We have to help them upskill and raise their educational attainment to whatever level that they're capable of and they're driven to achieve. We need to help them with that and meet them where they are. Because as we raise individuals and their capacity to contribute to our economy, we grow the workforce and grow the opportunity for prosperity for everyone. So it's really an array of investments across the entire pipeline that allows the entire society to rise up to the opportunities of the future.
Thank you both on that. Absolutely.
earn to learn programs where businesses are making it possible for employees to start a new career or to get release time, whether it's the childcare component. Lori's absolutely right. We're seeing right now a shift in the data to a huge demand for short-term training to help people seek reemployment or help people transition in employment. But we need to make sure that's part of a pathway for lifelong learning. The one thing we do know is that the numbers don't lie, that the vast majority of upskilling and new degrees and credentials in Maine will come from people already in the workforce over these coming years. And those people are holding down a job and typically raising a family and struggling with how to understand their options and deal with all those things when life gets in the way. So, it's helping these families navigate through, and the employer can sometimes play a crucial role directly with the employee who's upskilling, and sometimes play a crucial role in some of those family supports or family flexibilities that make the upskilling even feasible in the first place. So it's both and, like Lori said, we have about 8% of Mainers who have a certificate, a certification, or an industry credential, and 40-some% who have a formal degree. And both parts of those equations will be really crucial to growing those numbers.
Couldn't agree more, Yellow. Great. We probably have time for one more question, possibly two. So Ben, the next one.
Yeah, thanks, Cliff. We have about 6 minutes left, so we have one question here. All of these reports, measures of growth, the 10-year economic plan, and the Economic Recovery Committee, dovetail off one another, which as a state is unprecedented. Can any of you speak to the value of the interconnectivity between these documents and the working together among them?
Yeah, I'm guessing we all want to jump in on that one, but I do think it's really important. And one of the things I think it shows, and I'll be quick so everybody can have a turn, but one of the things I think it really shows is that there are some really core principles that can move our economy forward and create opportunity across the state. And because they work together, I think it gives us a better chance to move forward, right? This reinforcement of these key principles and key opportunities is critical. And the ability to have measures of growth as an accountability factor to make sure that we are making progress in these key spaces is really helpful. Lori or Yell?
The alignment is crucial because the most important element of success will be persistence. And so setting a vision, I mean, we all know, whether we're doing planning in our own organizations or for something as ambitious as for the state we love, that, a good strategy well executed will beat a brilliant strategy with mediocre execution. So we have this vision from the 10-year plan. I think it's pretty darn good. The ERC overlay and update is fantastic. And it ties us to these core principles and core areas of talent, innovation, infrastructure, and equity. And that's been consonant across. And so having the ERC's work clearly be guided by the true north of the 10-year plan, instead of throwing it out and starting over, and then having the Growth Council work to realign the presentation format and nuances of its metrics to align, so that we have a better chance of mutually reinforcing and thereby assuring the persistence, which will be the true magic of success, I think is great. And the fact that we've been able to be in the same room together as collaborators. So during the 10-year process, when we went for that public input, and Maine stakeholders overwhelmingly said, you can't progress the economy without addressing housing, childcare, and workforce transportation. I got to be in the same room with the commissioner hearing that message, and so we could carry that back through all these different channels.
Thanks, Yellow. Lori, you want to add into that?
Thank you. I would just add, in the process of structuring the work of the ERC, we very purposefully aligned it with the phenomenal work that had been done to honor the over 1,000 people that set that bold vision in the 10-year plan. And two of our speakers really hit home with me, David Rue and Karen Mills, Karen used to run the Small Business Administration under the Obama administration. David Rue formed the Rue Institute. And they said to be successful in this highly competitive global economy, you have to have monomaniacal focus. And you can't have focus if you keep switching horses or getting attracted by the next bright, shiny object or flavor of the month. So aligning these three, I think, is a gift to the people of Maine. And we've got to stay the course on this. And if we stay the course, we can accomplish anything.
I think we're probably out of time, but on behalf of the Maine State Chamber and all in attendance, I want to thank each and every one of our panelists today in this crucial subject matter for participating, giving us insights, updating us, and just providing good leadership in this area. Laurie, Yellow, and Commissioner Johnson, consistency in message, focusing on the narrative and having the interconnectivity of these reports, I agree, is absolutely critical. You all have done a great job. You're leaders in this area. We want to all thank you. And with that, a round of virtual applause for the three of you. And we're ready to go to a break with one of our sponsors. So thank you.
At Spectrum, for 30 years, we've been investing in and building a network that's ready for anything. And then anything happened. And our network was ready to do exactly what it was designed to do, keep you connected. And when that connection became a lifeline, we provided free internet for over 500,000 students and teachers, opened up our coast-to-coast Wi-Fi network to everyone, and helped get small businesses back to business. But we won't stop there. We're still building and investing. In the last 3 years alone, we've expanded our network, connecting nearly 2.5 million new homes and businesses, almost 1/3 of them in rural areas, connecting more people to empower more opportunity and finding new ways to serve you better, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Because we think being ready for anything means our work is never done. Spectrum.
Good morning. I'm Linda Caprera, Senior Government Relations Specialist at the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. The strength of the Maine economy is what drives businesses forward in our state. Moderated by Dana Connors, our next panel will examine the 2-year Maine State budget and how its potential impact on our economy is going to be in the coming years. Dana?
Thank you, Linda, and welcome back, everybody. Before I introduce our two very special guests to talk about the budget, I do want to take a moment to circle back to our first panel for two reasons. Number one, I have the privilege to work with all three of those, and what we have been witness today is such an inspiration for all of us because of how talented they are, how committed they are, and how well they work together for the best of state of Maine. The other thing is that I would remind us, because it's rare that I have seen in my experience, the fact that you have a plan that moves the state forward that we all buy into because of the priorities that we can all agree upon, and how all three of them are working collaboratively to get the job done. That has to be encouraging for all of us. I think it's something that we can take a lot of pride in, and it's certainly a call for all of us to work together to do exactly what you've heard in this first panel. It's a great setting for the rest of today as well as tomorrow. It is now my great honor and good fortune to introduce to you, to bring to you two very experienced and knowledgeable leaders of the Appropriation and Financial Affairs Committee of the state. Linda has set up the fact that the two of them will be speaking about the budget. And let me tell you who they are. First of all, we have Senator Kathy Breen, and we also have the House Republican lead, Solemn Mellott. I welcome you both and indicate once again how much of a pleasure it is to have you both. You are very experienced. You've had an outstanding career in both state and local service, and that is to our benefit as well as the state's. Senator Breen, She is the Senate Chair of Appropriations. She is serving in her 4th term. And 2 terms, she has had the same position as chair of this very important Appropriations Committee. She represents Senate District 25, and I think I have this right because I live in one of those communities. It's Falmouth, it's Yarmouth, it's Cumberland, it's Gray, and 2 islands of Chesapeake and Long. I don't think I've left anything out, Senator.
Half of the city of Westbrook.
Oh, okay, very good. I did. Thank you for that. We also have representative from the House Republican, a lead on appropriations, Solemn Mellott. Let me tell you a little bit about both. He also, I should say, is, like I said, the lead Republican on appropriations. In both instances, they've had outstanding careers. I've mentioned that Senator Breen this is her 2nd term as chair of appropriations. She has distinguished herself in that position, but she also, in her previous life in the legislature, was on the Environment and Natural Resources Committee. She's a strong advocate as well as a steward for the environment. And at the local level, when she was chair of the Falmouth City Council, she received national attention for her campaign on open spaces. Solemn Mellott, as I mentioned, is a go-to person. He has had 7 terms in the legislature. I repeat, 7 terms. And every instance, whether he carried the title or not, he's always been seen as a leader. His knowledge of state government and all that happens with that level is pretty special. He represents House District 71, and those are the foreign countries, I should add, of Norway, Sweden, and West Paris. And back here in Maine, it's Waterford. I want to thank them both. I also want to mention that in the case of Solemn Mellott, here is a person whose career has spanned both the legislature, but he's probably worked for most all of the governors since Governor Langley. I remember him as Educational Commissioner as well as Commissioner of Appropriation and Financial Affairs. I only add this in his instance. If we ever establish a Hall of Fame for public service, I suspect he'll be one of the first to be inducted. So you see what type of talent and knowledge that this panel brings. And we're going to ask him, as Linda's mentioned, to talk about the budget. We have just heard a panel that has really, in my opinion, set the course for how those priorities are going to grow our economy and really benefit the people of our state. As you have in these early stages, are dealing with the supplemental, but also the biennial budget, can you share with us what you see in the budget that would reinforce or speak to those priorities, or maybe things that would be barriers to the success of some of those? And above all else, if there are anything in the budget that you feel that our audience should know about, you're more than free to do just that. So we invite questions because we know you'll have many, and as the previous example, you go to your chat box, enter them, and we'll be about our business. With that, Senator Breen, again, it's my pleasure to welcome you, and the floor is yours.
Dana, good morning, and I thank you and the Chamber for inviting me today to speak with your members and the public and anybody who's tuning in today. It's a real honor to be with you, and I really appreciate the kind words that you said about me, and I completely agree with everything you said about Representative Mellott. It's been an extraordinary pleasure to work with him over these last 3 years and the next coming years, and I'm very fortunate in that regard. So to the budget in particular, I want to sort of zoom out before we get into some of the particulars. And the first thing I want to say is I want to give your audience and the public and the business community the assurance that Maine state government is on solid financial footing. And that's not the case in every state. That's also not the case in the wake of a once in a century pandemic that has taken historic and unprecedented tolls on state revenue. And of course, we've had no federal assistance for state government at all that goes to filling in those revenue gaps. There's been no, there has been money that has stopped in state government and then gone out to other entities, including some public health and safety things, state government functions. But there has been nothing that says to state and local governments around the country, hey, you've taken a huge hit. We're going to help you out. So the first thing is, I just want to make it clear that the budget that the Mills administration has put together, both the supplemental and the biennial, keeps core government functions in place. The two biggest things that state government does is educate our children and young adults in a high quality K through 12 system, as well as 3 robust higher ed systems. In addition, it provides health insurance to low-income Mainers who don't get it through their employers, but who need health insurance for basic functioning. So in this biennial budget proposal, despite the revenue shortfalls, there are no cuts to those basic state government core functions, which is a huge relief to me and many in the legislature. In addition, I just want to remind folks that the state employee retirement system in Maine is healthy and robust. It's actually rated one of the top 10 systems for fiscal stability in the country. You hear a lot in the news about state retirement systems going belly up. That is nowhere near the case in Maine, and that should also give us all a good night's sleep. Lastly, the bond rating agencies did a round of evaluations in the late fall because of the pandemic, and there were states who had a downgraded bond rating because of the revenue effects of the pandemic on state coffers. Maine has maintained its AA bond rating, and part of that is because our rainy day fund is higher than it's ever been. And the two budgets that are in front of us right now actually propose to build the rainy day fund rather than tap into it to meet some of the revenue shortfalls that we're experiencing. So I want to say that in general, I want the business community to appreciate that, like businesses all over the country and the state is a business, and it has had the same sort of chaos that any business had, with having to switch to remote operations, having to meet needs it didn't see coming, and having less revenue than anticipated. And these two budgets keep the trains running on time. And that's something that I don't want anybody to take for granted. So with that, I will turn more specifically to the question of what these two budgets do to address the economic growth priorities that you've heard so much about this morning from other folks. So in particular, there is an additional $8 million that's going to go to the CDC for various measures to address not only the pandemic, but our underlying public health infrastructure. There's 45 million new dollars going into our K through 12 education system, and we will be bringing up the level of funding that the state is putting in higher than ever, up to 51.83. You may recall that there was a referendum about in 2003 or 4 that the state be mandated to pay 55% of state aid to education. So we are getting closer to that goal with this budget. We also have a $16 million investment in cyber security. As everybody in the business community knows, the threats to that arena are ever present and ever more complex. And it's really important that the state make critical investments in cybersecurity to keep our business safe, to keep our customers, our employees, our health information, to keep all of that secure. We put an additional $36 million into the public retirement system, which is mandated by the Constitution. We spend a little bit more money on the early college program. As you could imagine, I assume that somebody talked about early college before me, but basically it's helping high school students earn some college credits while they're still in high school. And then they wind up entering high school with a lot of credits. It used to be something that was available only to like AP students, but the community college system and the university system have made great strides in the last 5 or 10 years, making college courses available to high school students all over the state from diverse backgrounds and high schools. And it's really helping kids make that transition more successfully. So during the pandemic, when a lot of kids have been home doing education online, many of them have figured out that this is a convenient way to get some college credit, and they are taking advantage of that. So we are investing in that program with another $2.5 million. We also have $2 million going into renewable energy efforts for local governments, so that municipalities can be doing some upgrades to address climate change issues, as well as save money for local taxpayers. So those are some of the highlights, and I'm going to stop now and give my colleague, Representative Mellott, a chance to offer his reflections.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Mellott, floor is yours.
Representative Mellott, we can't hear you.
You're on mute. Yeah.
I think I'm on now, right? Okay, well, thank you very much, Dana, for your opening comments, and Senator Breen for your presentation. You've given us, the two of us, a rare challenge to make clear and sensible one of the biggest challenges that a new legislature faces when we convene in the odd calendar year. It is the largest policy document that newly elected legislators will be faced with. And of all of the 1,500 to 2,000 bills that we deal with, in my mind, it is the most important. It covers everything that the legislature in the state of Maine is constitutionally charged with doing to serve the people of Maine, to serve its institutions, and to assist in the economy that supports and pays for these services. I've always looked at it as a challenge to not only the 13 members of the Appropriations Committee, but to the entire elected members of the legislature, simply because it requires compromise, and ultimately it requires a 2/3 vote to put in place a 2-year budget on or before July 1 of that first year of the session. In the Appropriations Committee, and in the room that we occupy and spend most of our lives in, we have 13 members. 8 of them are serving on the committee for the first time this year. Senator Breen and her House counterpart, Representative Peirce and John Martin, are returning. And on the Republican side, Representative Amy Arata from New Gloucester and I are returning. The other 8 members are new to the process, but not new to the legislature. And thus far, they've shown not only interest in, but a commitment to meeting the challenges that lie before us. I'm looking at the budget not just as the biennial package that we will start hearings on Tuesday, February 16th, but the supplemental that we've just finished hearing and we'll be working on next week, And the 2-year budget, along with the supplemental, I think will serve as a bridge from where we were before everything came tumbling down to the out biennium of 24-25, which shapes my view of my role and our role as a committee to one of visionary and not transitory. I've never felt that a budget should be a Band-Aid applied to difficult choices to get us through the next election, but that it ought to serve well to guide the people of Maine with a service plan and an affordability check that carries quality services into the next generation. So with that in mind, it's always frustrated me that some newly elected legislators and some veterans have always come to me and said, well, I've never voted for a budget yet, and I never will. And I appreciate being able to vote no, because it's easier for me to explain this back home. I hope we can somewhat curb that desire to be a naysayer and look at the challenge that's before us as one that we need to step up because we need a bipartisan compromise to do our job and do it right. So this morning, I would like to take my look at the proposals from the governor in an objective, analytical way, tempered with some history, and to present what I believe address the topic, namely serving the people of Maine and growing the economy in the most appropriate and substantive ways. To do that, I thought I would take a quick look back at the most recent economic downturns and just very briefly talk about how they are similar and how they differ from what we faced back on March 17th. If you remember, and I'm sure all of you do, because you were really part of a very strong economy, at the end of February, we had a revenue forecast that built upon a positive growth recommendation in the previous December with another $75 million projection of revenue growth. Days later, even early in March, we began to get the feeling that all was not well within the health sector and that the pandemic was a serious issue to be dealt with. So the world got turned upside down on March 17th and has been that way ever since. So here are 3 different previous periods where we had an economic downturn of serious proportions: 1990, 2002, and 2008. Just a very quick reference to 1990, which Dana Connors and I were very much a part of. The turndown came late in the calendar year. It was sudden, it was deep, it was regional, particularly affecting the Northeast. It was a very political time, and it resulted in a 3 to 5 year recovery before we got back to where we were before the downturn. We utilized cuts. We actually made program reductions and eliminations, used the curtailment mechanism seriously for one of the first times. We engaged in workers' comp reform discussions that extended not only from 90 through the 91 session and the shutdown that followed in the summer of 91, but really into the next budget of 1993 as well. We did some retirement reforms, and we ultimately ended up doing something that we all hoped we never would have to do, and that was to embrace a package of temporary tax increases, both sales and individual and corporate income. 2002 comes along at the very last year of the Governor King administration, built upon a budget adopted in 2001 that seemed to be reflecting a strong economy. We all know about the dot-com bubble that burst. We all know, or some of us remember, that the 99 budget and the 2001 budget as biennial adoptions each included more than 100 million of one-time monies to allow that spending level to increase. And those one-time sources were, for example, in one of the 2 biennia, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield went from a nonprofit, non-taxable entity to a taxable entity. Those dollar amounts compared to what we're looking at today seems small, but relative to the budget at that time, $100 million more of spending than base revenues was significant. The 2002 problem was solved in the outgoing year for the governor with a lot of curtailments, draining down what then was called the rainy day fund and doing some post-election curtailment approvals even after the election before the end of 2002. 2008 was another one that I was on the Appropriations Committee, and it came as a national downturn, huge job losses, deep revenue decline, resulting in the federal government and the newly elected President Obama to acknowledge the severity with what was called the ARRA stimulus package. It was thought to be a short recovery period, but it ended up that we really didn't get back to the job numbers for closer to 6 years. So from 2008 to 2014, we were kind of, as one previous economist said, kind of bumping along the bottom, but we didn't really bounce back and get back to the pre-downturn numbers until 2014. So those three, compared to where we are today and what happened last March, totally different in terms of causation. It wasn't that the economy was weakening, it was that the pandemic hit us squarely between the eyes. And we saw a surging economy almost come to a screeching halt once the emergency powers were exercised by Governor Mills, as authorized by the outgoing legislature on March 17th. And we've been through nearly a year of controlled economic growth or lack thereof that has impacted all of us, and for which we are attempting through the budgets before us to recover from. And it won't be easy, and it certainly won't be quick. Senator Breen mentioned that the first CARES Act, which gave us the largest chunk of money that came to the state for government purposes, did not include revenue backfilling, and that is very true. However, it has resulted, along with its succeeding counterparts, in more than $8 billion of federal money being infused into the Maine economy since the early days of the controlled slowdown within the economy. And of that $8 billion, $4.7 billion went directly into the economy for things like the Paycheck Protection Program, the assistance for many institutions, higher ed, K-12 education, etc. Think about that, if you will, $8 billion in one actual 12-month, almost yet to be 12, but 11 going on 12, is the equivalent of the biennial budget adopted in 2019. So a huge infusion. While it didn't result in benefits to revenue backfilling, it did help control the pressure on the economy and the businesses that are listening today from falling under. So I think that we have to acknowledge that it was a significant benefit to us. Thinking about the similarities and differences, the first two were in an election year for a Maine governor. They were regional and they were difficult. They resulted in curtailments and cuts and repealing or draining our reserves. We had no federal support per se in either of those two. The last two have been during presidential succession years and have involved huge amounts of federal money. Consequently, we've seen a change in the curve or the lines of growth in the state budget because we've substituted a lot of federal monies for state monies, and we will see a lot of that as we delve into the biennial budget upcoming. So with that kind of background, I think the challenges are upon us, and I think they are unique this time around. As I mentioned, those 8 brand new members on the Appropriations Committee, I think will be up to the challenge. And I think that we will work well together to try to come up with a bipartisan package that addresses both goals of this panel topic. I think that our auxiliary role as legislators invested in this responsibility is to keep our new members in the loop, because there are, on my end of the hall, about 45 brand new members. A few of them have been here before, but many of them are brand new to this process. We risk in a virtual environment seeing them overwhelmed by the challenges of a complicated package of proposals, which they as policy committee members have to do their part in weighing in on, but they've had little preparation and very little opportunity to have the line of conversation and caucus discussion and in-session debate that we normally would have. So here are my list of the positives and the negatives, and then I'll try to address the larger picture going forward and hopefully get to the line of questions here momentarily. Without repeating what Senator Breen said, I would say from my point of view, the budget that Governor Mills has presented in the biennial package has no increases in tax rates. It allows the Budget Stabilization Fund to remain without reduction, and at the present time to even grow. It addresses something that we Republicans have wanted to see done for a while, and that is it puts money addressing the Section 29 wait list for developmentally disabled citizens of our state who have been on waiting lists. It does commit money to rebuilding our public health infrastructure. As proposed, it does not include layoffs, and it makes no new program expansions. Modifications, yes, but no brand new programs within the document itself. It does, as Senator Breen mentioned, and the governor has acknowledged, make significant investments in healthcare, education, and economic development, all topics addressed in the previous panel. It does utilize, for the benefit of the employers, large and small, an acknowledgement that the governor made to use some of the CARES money to stabilize our unemployment fund so that rate increases would not be in the offing, at least in the short term. And we all can relate to the fact that our unemployment infrastructure has been taxed to a level of demand and almost being overwhelmed with responsiveness and attention to the problems that many of our employees have faced. So I think addressing that was important. I think when I switched to, well, before I do, let me just say, even though some of my colleagues would not agree with this, I would characterize the biennial budget as reflecting a modest increase in proposed appropriations. Here are the numbers. In the current year budget, the appropriations approved through last March 17th total $8.086 billion. That's for a 2-year period, for the year that will end in a little over 7 months, a little less than 7 months now. The 2-year budget proposed would increase that number to $8.394 billion for 22 and 23 fiscal years. That is a $308 million increase, a little less than 4% biennium to biennium. And there's a lot of inside messaging that goes along with that, because we operate on a baseline budget, which maybe we can talk a little bit about in the questions. So compared to more than an 11% increase in 2019, when we increased the prior budget by over $800 million, this is modest by comparison. Some of the negatives that I just want to touch upon but not dwell upon. At the moment, there is a concern among several of us, and I think many who are watching and listening this morning, that our proposals do not at the moment allow for full conformity on the paycheck protection loans that were forgivable by the federal government and not taxed, so that we are, as a package at the moment, would not be fully conforming to the federal attention to that program, which has kept many businesses from falling under and many, many employees from receiving a paycheck even when they were not allowed to work. That to me is a concern that will require our attention, both short and long term. And I know things are in the offing for discussing that even as we speak. A comment about the overall transitory budgets, supplemental to biennial. In my view, there's a heavy reliance on one-time saving. The curtailments that the governor put in place during the summer and the spending controls that she put in even sooner result in $222 million worth of one-time savings. Some of that benefit will carry into the biennium and help us reach a paper balance. So there is a lot of reliance on one-time spending reductions, and they tend to characterize the plan going forward. Within the biennial budget, it troubles me to some extent that there are 77 new positions, and at the moment, it appears no reduction in positions, even though we've held dozens vacant during the last 10 months. There will likely be, in my view, a property tax impact felt sooner rather than later, unless we have a gain in the revenue forecast in late April, or a supplemental that maybe a change package that allows the general purpose aid program to grow more than the $22.5 million per year that Senator Breen referenced. I'm not criticizing that move. I clearly know that, as you all do, that we do not have the resources to go immediately to 55%, even though the voters suggested that was our target and asked us to get there sooner rather than later back in 2004. The same thing would be true with revenue sharing, where we're proposing to continue at 3.75% for the upcoming 2 years, and that's tied to the health of the sales and income tax revenues. So while the percentages will remain flat, the amount of income from tax-paying payments to the state depends upon the health of the economy. So once again, we're dealing with volatility that it's hard to really characterize at the moment. And I think that to some extent, this budget and the revenue forecast that was put forth in December assumes additional federal stimulus money in the pipeline. That is likely. To what extent and when, I think, represent the $64 questions. Finally, just to wrap up my comments, and I apologize for getting too into my views and my historical assessment of the challenge before us, but they are real. And here are where I think some issues that are not currently addressed in the budget that we need to be thinking about. And if I sound like I'm a big spender or an investor, I'm really at a point in time where I think targeted investments to address the transportation problem that we all know is facing the highway budget, and we've been bonding our way through that in the last few years. We need a longer-term solution. Be prepared for strategy discussions and likely bond proposals to address that. I agree with Commissioner Figueroa in a comment she made at the supplemental budget. We need to make a more targeted and continued focus and commitment to improving our state facility infrastructure. We defer spending on our own facilities. We go back and forth between renting and building, and we really need a longer-term strategy for that. Building on the previous panel, I believe, and I have a bond bill, that's surprising to some, I'm sure, that would use bond monies to address the workforce development needs and projected shortage that we're all aware of for later in the decade. I would utilize bonds to allow for training at no cost for young and displaced workers to address those perceived and likely identified shortage in work sector areas that would help the economy recover, partly influenced by the 10-year strategic plan, but we will identify them as we go forward. So those issues, along with, and again, once again repeating the first panel, if you listen, and you did, I know, the Economic Recovery Committee, Climate and Innovation, energy proposals, and bond recommendations from particularly the Economic Recovery Committee are not contained at the moment within the biennial budget. We need to think clearly and strategically about those recommendations when they are forthcoming on the table and discussed in the context of what we can afford and what is the higher priority of commitment over the next few months. In my view, we need to be strategic. We need to be prioritizing what we can afford to do. We need to be consistent in general and as much as possible in specific roadmap targets of the strategic 10-year plan. And we need to be aware of the fact that of the 186 legislators, many of them have their own spending priorities, which will end up either in the bond packages that are being discussed, drafted, and being heard soon, as well as the bills that might find their way to the appropriations table. It would shock some of you, I'm sure, to know that when we adjourned on March 17th, there were nearly $1 billion of individual bills on the appropriations table and nearly $1 billion of bond bills that had been heard but not acted upon. So those issues are over and above the biennial budget and the supplemental, which we're grappling with at the moment. Finally, some additional concerns that I'm hoping that we can reach consensus on. In my view, it would be a tragedy if we were to resort to increased taxes or increased regulatory burdens that inhibit economic recovery. You folks have suffered enough. You've been through more pressure imposed from without as opposed to within. And it is going to be, in my view, a slower than anticipated return to normalcy. So we need to be thinking about not getting in the way, at the same time helping to promote and stimulate economic recovery as fast as possible. I have some concerns about the Consensus Economic Forecasting Commission and the Revenue Forecasting Committee proposals, even though I want to put in a good word for it. We are miles ahead of where we were in previous economic downturns. We have a very professional process of twice annual economic forecasting proposals and a twice annual revenue forecasting done by smart people, well committed, and a good reputation. Finally, I'm troubled by the fact that our three separate but equal branches of government have not all been equally involved in the last year in trying to get through the difficult times as opposed to getting beyond them. The governor has exercised her emergency powers the best that she could. She's done some good things. She's done some things that I think probably if the full legislature were involved would have been done differently. But this is not the time to engage in rearview mirror speculation. I just think that it is time that we acknowledge that the virtual process we're in today is not helping us get to long-term decision making. We need to be able to see each other, talk with each other, and actually share information and negotiate with one another. And I hope that we will find our way back to that level of open sessions, more interactive discussion, and that is critical in my opinion. The alternative to that is mandates and partisan gridlock, and I don't think either would satisfy us or serve us well. I want to stop now and say, for all of us who saw Humpty Dumpty fall off the wall back on March 17th, we know it's not going to be possible to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, no matter how much we try in the short term. We have caused the world to be turned upside down for businesses, for local and state governments, including the county governments, to the institutions like higher ed, K-12, healthcare, have been turned upside down along with our communities and our families. And that has caused a real reduction in the value of our socialization, our educational achievement. family, prosperity, and the notion of community sharing. Isolation is not good, and it leads to depression and some serious mental health challenges. I will stop there and say that I want to encourage all of my colleagues to acknowledge that we're in a really serious stage of making decisions that will affect not just the next biennial budget, but the next generation. And we need to look at our assignment today to serve the Maine people better and to help grow the economy by making strategic and long-range and appropriate decisions by working together. Thank you.
Well, now you know why I indicated at the very outset that we are very lucky to have the leadership that's represented in these two individuals. Their knowledge and experience in times like this are priceless in value. We do have some time for questions. We have probably about 15 minutes. I want to be sure that we honor that. I'm going to turn to Linda in a moment. But I want to pick up on a point that was made that not only reflects the past panel, but you've all touched upon it, and that is the investment in infrastructure or in bonds. It's customary, as I recall through my experience, that bond requests come later in the session. My understanding is that the governor has prepared or is in the process of preparing a bond request that will present it to you. It's going to be done sooner rather than later. And in light of what we've heard in the first panel, as well as your own priorities, can you share with us if you are expecting that and what you would like to see in it, knowing that the strategic plan places an emphasis on talent, on innovation, on critical investments. And this part certainly is a critical investment when we think of bonds. Senator, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. Well, as the business community certainly knows, the conditions for borrowing money right now are particularly good. Interest rates are at historic lows, and the bond market is a great place for us to do some long-term investments. As Representative Mellott said, we have become far, and I think I'll say it more, I'll have a stronger opinion about it. We've become far too dependent on bonding for transportation infrastructure in Maine. There's two reasons for that. Part is because the federal government has really cut back on transportation. There's just been quite a lot of gridlock, no pun intended, in Washington for transportation funding. In addition, there's been a lot of political resistance to doing anything on the tax side of the equation, and the gas tax here in Maine is nowhere near sufficient to fund our infrastructure needs, just keeping up with the infrastructure that we have. So we have been relying on bonds, which then, of course, we have to pay back with general fund dollars, and that is something we've been doing repeatedly every session, which I really wish we would change. However, there are other situations that do sort of lend themselves to bonding that have to do, for instance, with growing internet capacity. I have a proposal to help local communities deal with climate change impacts and adaptations. I represent a lot of communities along the coast. There are water districts and soil conservation districts, municipalities, all sorts of organizations that are going to have to address rising sea level and other storm impacts on critical public infrastructure. And I think the state has a role to play that not the entire pay, not pay for all of it, but certainly be able to partner with other units of government to address those challenges. To the extent that we have public buildings that we need to renovate and maintain, again, that's a place where bonding is appropriate because those things get paid off over the life of the project. I think of bonds as similar to mortgages, where you it's for a big capital project and you pay it off over the life of that piece of property or piece of equipment. There will be a lot of bond proposals from some of our peers that don't fit those categories. I think there are some folks who think that bonding can be used for anything, for programs, for any number of standard government functions. That's not really the case. So we will have hearings on each one of those. And as Dana said, the governor will have a proposal for a bond package that will probably include something to do with energy, something to do with infrastructure, something to do with climate change. I also have a bond in for the Land for Maine's Future project, which is important conservation program and important to our long-term climate health. So as much as it is a good environment for issuing bonds, we will certainly have far more demand than we will put to the voters. So that's usually done after the budget is closed towards the end of the session, because we then can, in short order, get it on the November ballot.
Representative Mellott, your response?
Yeah, I would echo everything that Senator Breen has mentioned. I'm not privy to what the governor's package might contain or look like. As she mentioned, a lot of the recommendations from the Economic Recovery Committee, I'm sure, will be part of that package. The sooner we get it and are able to begin dissecting and public hearings on the proposals, the better off we'll be. I agree with her comments too, that transportation infrastructure has relied too much on bonding, and the general fund has been the source of it for much of the current century. I think we've relied on our senior U.S. senator to bring home the bacon, and hopefully that will continue. But we need a better plan, and we need to be aware of the fact that every time you put a question out to the voters, which we do as an approving level of endorsement here at the legislature and with the governor's signature, then the voters authorize, sometimes not really knowing the immediacy of the issue or the effect and when it will kick into the debt service line in the state budget and how that is paid for. But we often do this without realizing that the public needs to know more about the tangible asset that's being bonded for. And I would like to see more transparency on that level and a more sequenced and strategic approach. As Senator Breen mentioned, we have great bond ratings. We have a good constitutional lever that says that debt service will be paid with the first dollars that come in from the revenue side. And we do a 10-year amortization, which is really good and helpful to our rating. So I look forward to the discussion. I think there will be interest in broadband, interest in Land for Maine's Future, as long as access is part of that discussion. I mentioned workforce development. Clearly, what comes out of the committees that we've talked about will be center stage. So a lot involved there. And like you said, Dana, in posing the question, this will be part of a longer term investment that will come due in payment terms in future biennia. But we need to be thinking about it sooner rather than later.
I know that you both referenced the point that even though the governor has presented her budget, and clearly it does have a very important role in kind of shaping our direction going forward, where we're going to set our priorities, what we're going to do, how we're going to serve our public. I guess I would also ask, I should say, and that a lot of her individual proposals are going to come during the course of the session, because that's a benefit of being in the governor's position, to be able to offer those. And I think we can expect a number of bills that will reinforce parts of the Economic Recovery Committee, the strategic plan, and so forth. I guess I would ask, as you think about the strategic plan and the benefits of the Economic Recovery Committee, there are issues like, particularly in this one would be a bond issue, within innovation, the role of research and development to be able to help transition our businesses from one stage to another, if you will. Our talent, there is no substitute for the value of education from the earliest, the early childhood care and education, the daycare issue, K-12, higher ed, adult. I mean, there's such an emphasis on the ways we're going to grow our economy through some of the benefits that we've heard from our previous speakers. Do you sense that, notwithstanding what I said a moment ago, that the governor is yet to submit a number of these bills, do you see evidence in the budget that reinforce these priorities of talent, innovation, and the investment in bonds that you've just described? Senator?
Well, the bonds are going to be separate from the budget proposals, although we will use general funds to do the debt service, but they're not embedded in the biennial or the supplemental budget. So they are complementary, but they'll be taken up somewhat separately. But I do think the governor's economic advisors and her 10-year plan, the Economic Recovery Committee, a good number of those priorities are embedded in the budget document, including, higher education investments, K through 12 investments, and basic health care available to Maine people. In terms of the research and development, as folks probably know, Maine lags the rest of New England in that respect, and there will surely be a number of R&D bonds, and we did in the last session, I believe, increase the Maine Seed Grant program so that more dollars are available for innovators. But I want to point out just sort of a structural reality that Representative Mellott has hinted at in his remarks, which is, for folks who may know or who don't know, the legislature is in constant change. We have elections every 2 years, and we have term limits. And term limits, in my personal opinion, really hinder the longevity of some of these goals taking shape and taking root in the legislature, because every new legislator who comes in has a very distinct opinion about what the role of government is in business or in education or in childcare or what have you. Some people think that childcare is, a purely personal issue that every family has to solve on their own. Others see childcare as a really important part of the workforce and a stable workforce, and making sure that everybody can be as productive as possible to lift all boats and to grow our economy across the board. So you have a wide variety of individual opinions among the 186 of us on what the role of government really is across many, many big decisions and investments. And the fact that we are in a constant churn, in some cases, maybe that's a good thing, that we get fresh blood and we get a fresh perspective, and new people looking at old problems is a good thing. But it's also, there's a downside, because there is an enormous learning curve to learning how the legislature, how that process works, and getting to know issues that have been around for a long time. And I want to say that the three prior speakers, really emphasized the nature of what's going to help these plans come to fruition, and that is staying the course and the longevity of the vision and executing it methodically over time. I think there's an inherent challenge when you have your board of directors, if you will, changing over every 2 years. So it's just a reality that we all deal with. But and as Representative Mellott said, this session, having the pandemic forcing us to operate remotely so that we can keep our State House staff as safe as possible, adds another challenge. So I just wanted to share that perspective in terms of how the legislature interacts with the administration or any sort of long-term plan. There's just a structural rub there.
Representative Mellott?
Yeah, I would just weigh in and say that Senator Breen has mentioned the regular churn and turnover within the members of the legislature, and priorities change every 2 years. That's why I said in my earlier comments that I can go along with bonding that is strategic, that is prioritized, and to the extent possible, consistent with the 10-year economic development strategy. I've been before bond rating agencies, and I've been to Wall Street, and I've observed the attention that they pay to what's unique about Maine. And to the extent that we can tie our investments to tangible assets that address both aspects of this panel's topic, moving Maine forward and growing the economy, and show that we are part of a planning process that has longer term vision, the more likely we will get the good ratings that we've had in the past and be able to, I think, justify perhaps even a more expanded bonding package than we might have in earlier days. So it has to be strategic, and Senator Breen is right on. We need to have a connecting link that the rating agencies and the bond buyers say this is a good investment for Maine. Maine knows what they're doing, and they have a plan.
Agree with that. We're going to turn over to Linda now, who I know has some burning questions. But before I do that, I want to just make one comment. The issue of conformity has clearly been one so far that has really, to a large degree, dominated the discussion. We were one, frankly, that advocated for full conformity. It's apparent that the governor listened to that and has responded. We know it's before taxation. We know it's in the process. We could talk about that in the time, but it would be perhaps premature because from taxation we'll go to appropriations where it'll be finally resolved. It's a big issue. It's important to all of us, as it is you, but we know that that's in process. That's why we didn't speak in terms specifically to that. Linda, do you have a question? We have about 5 minutes left.
Yes, I've got a question. Thank you, Dana, and thank you, Senator Breen and Representative Mellott. You were very informative this morning. It's nice to see you. So one of the questions we had here that was submitted prior was the governor has recently asked state agencies to see if there is additional savings that can be achieved to provide more or free up money for tax conformity. With everything you know about the budget, do you feel confident that this can be achieved? And I pose that to both of them.
Kathy, do you want to start that, or do you? Sure. I think we both, knowing what we know, I think we probably both say stay tuned, because I think that discussion will play out in the next day or so and in the next week. And clearly, I think the message has been heard in Maine. And I'm of the opinion that it's a common message around the country, that many states that are struggling with their economies realize that the Congress intended full conformity, but gave no money to help the states achieve that in their revenue design plans for conformity. So I think we just need to be aware of the fact the point has been made. It is, for many of us, I speak for myself, priority number one, and I'm confident that we will get some progress in the next few days.
I will echo what Representative Mellott said. We are having conversations right now between the tax committee and the administration. And as Representative Mellott said, you know, the federal government is using its tools to stimulate the economy, which is a great thing. But we don't have the same set of tools. We have to balance our budget in a way that the federal government doesn't. So we are certainly committed to a bipartisan solution, and we will be working hard on that in the coming days.
The next question we had is, did the state realize savings from remote work? And if so, was that incorporated in the budget?
Yes, it did. It certainly, there's a lot of conferences, just like any business, a lot of travel and all sorts of remote operations were enacted. You know, it was one of those things, and this might be true for a lot of private businesses, but we've been talking about having the state workforce work more remotely now for, 20 years. And it was always challenging and ran into roadblocks and frankly just had a lot of inertia like a lot of large organizations. And then of course it had to do it like everybody else. So yes, there are savings. And if you look at the budget and the curtailment, that not only were a lot of positions frozen and left not filled, but there are all sorts of travel expenses that are zeroed out because of remote operations.
I would agree with that. I think, Linda, it would be difficult to put a dollar amount, but as Senate Chair has mentioned, in-state and out-of-state travel, the normal consumables that are part of the all other line category here in state government are not unlike what businesses deal with in terms of employee consumables. And at the workstation or the workplace, those expenditures probably have been relaxed or reduced and are part of the curtailment. And the justification statements that we have would suggest that there's a lot of managing within available resources.
As they say on TV, this looks like a wrap. I want to take a moment to thank both of you. You reinforce our confidence because we've had a tough year. We're still not over it. We have great hope and expectation, and we know we'll come out stronger on the other side. Having public servants like yourself with your knowledge, your experience, and your commitment, as well as your leadership, certainly give us the reassurance that that will happen. We thank you both. We look forward to working with you in the months ahead in the interest of our state, our people, our economy. Thank you. We'll be right back after this sponsor. Thank you.
At Bangor Savings Bank, we're with you rain or shine. We've remained true to our employees, customers, and our beloved Northern New England communities for nearly 170 years, just as our founders intended. And no matter what, we will continue to work tirelessly to meet your financial needs. That's because at the end of the day, you matter more. Whatever the weather, we stick together. Bangor Savings Bank.
Welcome back. I'm very excited about this panel, to be sure. Our summit's keynote speaker this year is Greg Powell. He's chairman of the Harold Alfond Foundation Board of Trustees. He has been chair since 2005, but his relationship with Mr. Alfond in both business as well as on a personal basis extends well before that time. Without question, there is ample evidence throughout our state of the long-standing commitment to education by the Harold Alfond Foundation. They were always motivated in the interest of providing opportunity for the people of our state. From birth throughout their career was their commitment. A most notable example is the recent $500 million grant in October in the midst of the pandemic for the purpose of helping Maine's people and institution to grow our state's workforce and our economy. It's well known that Mr. Alfond understood the intersection and relationship of education and our economy. He recognized that as the economy changes, so must education. And while change is constant, the value of education is not. It is sincerely my pleasure to turn it over to Greg Powell, who has a speech for us not only on what has just been said, but what comes next. Greg, thank you very much for being with us. I thank you for joining us at this Leadership Summit.
Well, thank you, Dana, and good morning to everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Working remotely these days, you never know. But I appreciate your kind words as well, and appreciate the opportunity to share a few thoughts about the Harold Alfond Foundation and the work we are doing here in Maine. Of course, like the rest of you, I wish this event could have been held in person, if not only to get a handshake with Solemn Mellott, and if also only you could experience the sheer visceral thrill of being in a room while I'm delivering a speech. Harold Alfond used to tell me my speeches were so boring they could put a rock to sleep. And somehow I get the feeling that if he were with us here this morning in this world of Zoom, he would be hoping that hitting the mute button gets rid of my voice and not yours. Well, anyway, Harold Alfond was not a big fan of my speeches, but he was a big fan of Maine and its people. In his lifetime, he also was a survivor of 4 pandemics, including the Spanish flu, which brought untold misery and death to over 50 million people worldwide. And if he were with us here this morning, he would tell us about the struggles of his time and how times of challenge bring moments of great opportunity. And he would want his foundation and the people of our great state to seize this moment, team up to beat the virus, and work together to turn tragedy into triumph and a better future for all Mainers from birth through career. In that spirit, we announced last October $507 million in grant projects for Maine on top of an existing $100 million in pre-existing program commitments. As we surveyed the state and the state of our state, we could see teamwork and partnership emerging between and among so many vital institutions throughout the state. We, like those institutions and so many of you at this gathering, wanted to seize this moment and do all that we could to recover from this challenging time and forge a brighter, better, and more prosperous future for our state. So $507 million it was. This morning, I would like to share the Foundation's views on this moment of opportunity. Then I would like to explain how we see education in partnership with employers and our state government as vital contributors to Maine's future, and give you some examples of projects and programs we are funding to help Maine recover and turn this moment of opportunity into a newfound prosperity. First, our views on where we are and the opportunity we have. As well described earlier this morning, our state has faced profound economic challenges for many years, long preceding the pandemic, with the loss of paper and textile industries, a declining workforce, an ill-equipped workforce missing the skills needed by the modern and global economy, an aging and unhealthy population, and low higher education attainment. No doubt, the pandemic has exacerbated those challenges. That said, the pandemic has also set the stage for opportunity, new growth, and development in our state. Consider this. Studies done before the pandemic have shown that a few select large cities in our nation have profited greatly from the advances of the modern tech economy, leaving much of our nation behind. Since the pandemic, however, such large cities have become less desirable places to live and work. And correspondingly, the rural state of Maine and its low density cities and towns have become more attractive places to live and work. Consider also our state's proximity to the tech and life sciences hub of Boston and the pandemic-driven national security imperative to move overseas pharmaceutical and other life science industries back home to the United States. And finally, consider that COVID-19 has shown us that remote work is possible, and with that has come signs of much needed immigration of young workers. According to data collected by the nonprofit initiative Live and Work in Maine, an influx of people between the ages of 24 and 35 have moved to the state since the start of the pandemic. It's this convergence of factors that we at the Foundation see as heightening the promise and opportunity of this moment. These factors suggest that now, more than ever, is the time to work together to invest deeply and significantly in the future direction of our state. Now is the time to fund and encourage initiatives that increase access to education, incentivize skilled workers to come and stay here, and reshape education for people of all ages to meet workforce needs of the modern global economy. And all of this to position Maine and its people for long-term economic success. While I agree, this is a tall order, and especially so at a time when public health needs rise above all others. But as the governor's economic recovery plan tells us, it is an essential order and one which must be filled strategically to maximize chances for success. And so at the foundation, we are looking to empower our state's education institutions to unify, to build on their strengths, to deploy the power of partnerships with employers, and to modernize the way they do business. And we are looking to employers and our state government to join in. Investment, we believe, is especially important in the tech, healthcare, engineering, and computer science fields, where skilled workers are needed and where the United States has been a leader and has a decided advantage competing across the world. In so doing, we see a growing and vital role of employers in education delivery and its modernization. In a world of high-tech, easily accessible data via the internet and artificial intelligence emerging, education must include prominent, relevant, experiential learning, which is multidimensional and nurturing of human creativity. And for relevant, experiential, creative learning, there is no place like the workplace. So at the foundation, we are especially interested in funding education which fosters deeper and more synchronized partnerships with employers, where each support the other with effort and money. The foundation's grant making covers a wide spectrum of state needs, and we have numerous grants with education partners deeply committed to economic development in their business models, each most deserving, each a vital contributor to our state's well-being. But let me focus this morning here on just a few of our more recent grants to illustrate, by way of example, the strategic themes we have been discussing. For decades, the University of Maine has had a world-class engineering program, but one that was unable to graduate enough students to meet the demands of Maine employers. The Orono-based program is at a distance from many of the engineering businesses in Portland with internship and full-time job opportunities. And conversely, while the University of Maine is located in Greater Portland, its program has been much smaller with, as I say, an unmet demand for local employers. Last October, we announced a grant of up to $240 million to the University of Maine system, a large portion of which will help create a new unified College of Engineering, Computing, and Information Science. Chancellor Malloy can tell you more, but thanks to his leadership, the system has obtained unified accreditation for all of its universities. And by the end of this year, this new college will have
Oh, wait, that's right. Finally. Okay, I think at least at this point. Oh, and there you are. Good touch on that one.
This initiative combines computing and information science programs, preparing students for much needed jobs in fields like artificial intelligence, data visualization, and human machine interaction. It will enable students to take integrated coursework at all University of Maine system campuses, increasing access to STEM education statewide. And working hand in hand with more industries and businesses, it will synchronize education offerings with labor force needs, graduate more students, and bring additional research funding grants to the state. Our grant to the University of Maine system will also further develop the Maine Graduate and Professional Center, integrating law, business, and public and health policy, a project we helped launch 4 years ago. The center, as we call it, merged the MBA programs at the University of Maine in Orono with the University of Southern Maine in Portland. The merged graduate business program then teamed up with the Maine Law School and the Muskie School of Public Service. This is the first university-level graduate program in the country to integrate accredited business, law, and public service education programs under one roof. The roof part is both a metaphor and an aspiration, I'd say, but a roof is coming and all three disciplines are going to be under it. The vision beyond that is to provide students with the advantage of cross-disciplinary skills and knowledge in business, law, and public policy, to prepare students at the graduate level for success in careers that are increasingly grounded in all three disciplines and are much needed in Maine. Since its launch, huge progress has been made. Exciting cross-interdisciplinary courses are being cross-taught and new ones being rolled out. The merged MBA program is now recognized as among the top 100 business programs in the country and a top value too. MBA enrollment has skyrocketed by 386% from 86 to 366 students in just 3 years, and enrollment expectations for the fall are over 400 students. And at the law school, we have a great new dean and former Chief Justice Lee Softly. There, applications are up 25%, enrollment and LSAT scores are up, and the bar exam passage rate has increased to 91%. And finally, the law school is housed in what experts have recognized to be the ugliest, most inefficient academic building in the free world. What a distinction. More importantly and seriously, the Maine Center's 3 graduate programs, working with CEO Terry Sutton, are promoting close working partnerships with Maine's business, legal, and public service employers, ensuring students have a direct pathway to professional opportunities in Maine, and that employers can readily access high-quality talent. Along with major funding support for student success and retention at the undergraduate level, which is part of our grant to the university system, our investments in the University of Maine system and the multifaceted work underway there represents a strategic, long-term effort to meet the state's most pressing higher education, workforce, and economic needs. Well, complementing the work happening at our 4-year institutions are the important initiatives underway within our community college system. And Heather spoke about this earlier in today's session. Nowhere in our state is there a greater need than to upgrade and modernize the skills of our underemployed and unemployed citizens. And there is no institution in our state better positioned to meet this critically important need. In that regard, one of the most promising and exciting ways of doing just that is through micro-credential course offerings. Simply put, micro-credentials are non-credit training programs that are tied directly to workforce needs. Micro-credentials provide opportunities for people to learn focused career skills in a shorter period and for less money than a traditional 2 or 4-year degree. They hold enormous promise to provide unskilled or underskilled adults with in-demand skills that businesses value, need, and will pay for. When micro-credentials work, they are demand-driven, with demand from both learners who want opportunities to advance their careers in meaningful ways, and from employers who want a better, more relevant way to find talent. And they can counter a multitude of problematic trends in higher education and the economy that disproportionately and adversely affect disadvantaged and low-income adults, including such things as rising college tuitions, low college completion rates, and a mismatch between the skills workers have and the skills employers need. The foundation recently provided the community college system here in Maine with a grant to fund out and to build out the infrastructure for micro-credential offerings and make them available system-wide to underemployed adults and others. If you read the paper yesterday, you will know that this program is off to a great start, proving its relevance and importance in training employees and meeting employer needs. Working with Hospitality Maine leaders, the Maine Community College System designed a pandemic best practices tutorial training course for hospitality workers. As of last week, over 10,000 people had earned badges in COVID readiness. Beyond COVID readiness, some 70 other micro-credentials have been developed and offered to hundreds of Maine workers. This year, students of all stripes will have the ability to earn 13 industry-recognized certifications in healthcare, IT, and construction, all from courses and programs of the Maine Community College system. In each case, industry partners help inform the programming to meet their needs for skilled workers and to provide a direct connection to good-paying jobs. Well, good-paying jobs is a great segue to the next Alphon grant recipient we should mention. Although not an education institution, Focus Maine serves as the connective tissue between Maine's workforce, employers, and education entities. This organization creates jobs in Maine's most globally competitive sectors and collaborates with a network of partners statewide to transform Maine's talent and assets into opportunity and prosperity. Here's an example of the power of Focus Maine's approach. Last year, it completed research on how to develop the occupational skills that agriculture businesses need. This year, Focus Maine is working with the community college system to operationalize this research and build micro-credentials and 4-credit programs to support the industry. Our October announcement included a grant of $5.18 million to expand Focus Maine's programs, accelerating job growth in 3 competitive and high-growth fields: the life sciences with biopharma, agriculture, and agriculture. Our investment in Focus Maine acknowledges the need to create jobs in Maine's high-potential sectors. It also draws a link between Focus Maine's job growth efforts and Maine's higher education community as they work together to strengthen our economy. A final example, and final, I promise, with extraordinary potential to transform Maine's economy is the recent launch of Northeastern University's Rue Institute. The Rue Institute is a new graduate school and research center, a tech, talent, and innovation hub with a new state-of-the-art campus in Portland. In the next 10 years, we expect the Institute's annual enrollment to exceed 2,700 students, with hundreds of employer partners across the country and in Maine. Northeastern launched the Rue Institute with a $100 million investment from tech entrepreneur and Lewiston, Maine native David Rue and his wife Barbara. Last October, the Harold Alphon Foundation matched the Rue's investment with a $100 million grant to support student scholarships, graduate education programming, and research capabilities for Maine in the fields of artificial intelligence, life sciences, computer and data science, digital engineering, and, as I say, the advanced life sciences and medicine. A compelling attribute of the Rue Institute and Northeastern's model of education is its close collaboration with employers and other education institutions in our state. The Institute has already assembled founding partnerships with numerous employers both here in Maine and beyond. If your business has a problem, the students and faculty at the Rue Institute will work with you to help solve it. Experiential education and real problem solving is the Institute's forte, and partnership and collaboration is in its blood. Already, it has partnered with the University of Maine in securing research grants and is working closely with our community college system to develop micro-credential offerings, which we've talked about a little earlier. The Institute is located within WEX's new headquarters in Portland, and several of the Institute's business partners share space with the Institute. In addition, the research component of the Institute, which is built to serve both Maine businesses and other industries nationwide, is expected to support more than 100 jobs and bring in more than $20 million in revenue annually. This is a bold and exciting project, and one like those I have also described this morning at the Community College and the University of Maine system and Focus Maine that we can't wait to watch come to fruition. Well, with all the background noise and everything else, there comes a time in every Zoom speaker's talk when he sees that framed video images of his audience are popping back up on his screen. They're framed live faces exuding unmitigated exhilaration and joy. And it's usually after the speaker says the words "in conclusion." So In conclusion, let me leave you with this. Support of education in Maine and modernizing its delivery through partnerships and collaboration with employers and state government is vital to building the skilled workforce needed to build and grow our economy. Unifying our efforts and working together, as has been said repeatedly this morning, is essential. And whether it's working across educational institutions or industries or working in partnership with state government and employers, teamwork is and will continue to be critical to our success. Teamwork, by the way, was a core value of Harold Alfond, the sportsman that he was, and is a core value of his foundation today. And so as we recover from the pandemic, and we will recover, this will be a time like no other in Maine's history to build a future of promise and great prosperity by working together. The Harold Alfond Foundation is honored and privileged to be a part of this work, a member of the team, and we thank all of you for all you have done and all you will do in the days ahead.
Greg, I thank you so very much on behalf of all of us. Clearly, you are a member of the team, but I would dare say that you deserve the title of not only captain, but most valuable player. When I hear and listen of the investments that you have made in education, in our communities, in our state, I'm kind of lost for words because there's no way that I could adequately express the appreciation that all of us feel and believe in what you have been able to do. You knew Harold Alfond as an individual. You had a relationship that was both personal as well as business. Nobody probably knows him better other than perhaps his children, his family. But clearly, you have taken his legacy with the Board of Trustees and continued that vision, that teamwork concept, and we so very much appreciate it. I hope you can stay with us because we have both our Chancellor and our President, Chancellor of the University System, President of the Community College System, and by way of introducing them, you remind me of something I think that most of us in public service at the state level have learned over the years. And that is that there are two things that unite all of us, regardless of where you live, what you do, or what your political persuasion is. The two things that unite us in this state is our economy, but also our people, particularly young people. We want the economy to be strong. We want it to be viable. We want it to be successful. We want our people to be the same. We want to provide them with the skills they need and the success that we want everyone to have. And you say, what does that have to do with education? I think we've all come to find that has everything to do with education. You're not going to get there without education. So your commitment to our state is unimaginable. I can't imagine what we would do today without it. And we have two people with us today that can certainly attest to that. They are both recipients of the recent grant, and I'm sure others, as you have expressed as well. Chancellor Mellott. The first time I heard of Chancellor Mellott, he was struggling with the financial woes of Connecticut. He was their governor. He was doing an outstanding job in a very difficult time. But here's something that you need to know. Not once did he forsake or forget the value of education, particularly higher ed. In spite of all the cuts and all the things that took place to deal with the financial, he was there for education. And frankly, we have seen the very same thing as Chancellor for the University of Maine system. It's a pleasure to welcome you, Chancellor Mellott. I also want to introduce at this time somebody that is certainly has made a commitment to the community college system from, you could say, the ground up. He has held various positions. He has learned as he has gone, and he is an incredible advocate for what the community college has to offer and the success that they need to have in order to prepare our people for the workforce and the skills that they need. We're fortunate to have the both of them here with us today. We are fortunate to have them both in the position that they occupy, and we're anxious to hear how the dollars that were provided to you by the foundation has been used to strengthen the capacity to meet the workforce needs, but also take the time to speak to what you're doing together as well as individually to address the skills, the trades, the higher ed that is so important to meet the needs of our economy. Chancellor, I hand it off to you, and thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you. It's great to be with you. I have to admit at the start, I only caught the latter portion of Greg Powell's address. We were experiencing some technical difficulties, but I have to say that on the screen just a few seconds ago, and with Mr. Powell having been with us, really my partners, our higher educational system, is dependent on the support of the broader community and particularly the business community. And that's where you and your introduction come in. We need to respond to the needs of that community, and we're trying to do a better and better job at just that. And in Dave Degler, really just a partner between the two of our systems. We educate the vast majority of individuals receiving associate degrees, baccalaureate degrees, master's degrees, and doctoral degrees, of the vast majority of those numbers. And our close working relationship, and I would add friendship, I think is important to the endeavors that we are undertaking. The Harold Alfond Foundation in and of itself has been a longtime supporter of both the community college system and our system, the University of Maine system. And quite frankly, to have received such an outstanding amount of the total commitment, most recent commitment of the foundation, really speaks well of our future. So I'd like to just put the screen up for a moment, whoever is operating that somewhere in the studio. And I'll leave this up just for a very short period of time. Our most recent commitment from the Alfond Foundation is around the 1, 2, 3, 4 things that you can see on your screen. Harold Alfond cared deeply about Division I athletics, and his commitment to the University of Maine here in Orono was extremely important. You can see a great statue of him outside the football stadium. The hockey arena bears his name, and the continued commitment is an important part of continuing to position Division I athletics as a draw to the University of Maine. But also, we will put particular emphasis as well on gender equity issues around our sports program, and look to build facilities that will be available to the broader community. We would love to have a more high school competition taking place at our facilities. We will invite other universities to enjoy those facilities as well. Then number 2 is student success and retention. Maine has one of the highest high school graduation rates in the nation, but has a much lower rate of students who go on to college. And then, quite frankly, we lose too many of our students in that first and second year. This commitment of $20 million and our own match of $25 million towards student success will play out at all of our universities, raising the rate of retention and success, meaning graduation, in my book. We look forward to these investments. I have to say, we're proud that in the last year alone, we saw a rise, I should say, in our retention rate from the spring semester to the fall semester of students not graduating, increased by 2%. Our goal has been and will be to raise that on a 1% basis. So we're off to a great start based on some early work we've done. But we will roll out additional programs around retention, not the least of which is to introduce students very early in their life as a student, that first year, into what their professed profession looks like, have an experience around that interest, and particularly in the STEM arena, to have a real meaningful hands-on experience in that first year, so people don't become discouraged or disjointed from the things that they want to pay attention to. We're looking to place more of our students in the internship and co-op experiences. Quite frankly, we'd like to see all of our students at all of our campuses be able to access such experiences, and look to use the monies committed to us and the monies that we need to raise around this issue. Again, a total of $45 million towards driving a much greater retention and much greater graduation. The next is the Maine College of Engineering, Computing, and Information, a very important investment in the future of Maine. As I speak to you today, we know that we are in fact seeing retirements outnumber graduation in engineering. And we know that there is a pent-up demand for engineers in Maine. We also know that it's a difficult state to move engineers from another state to. Our best bet of being competitive on an engineering basis with the rest of New England and the rest of the nation is to substantially grow our engineering offerings in the state of Maine. We'll do that by combining the programs at the University of Southern Maine with the University of Maine. Enlarging our number of seats for incoming freshmen very substantially, ultimately enlarging our graduation numbers by about 100% over a measured period of time. And we know that this is a forecaster of economic strength and growth in the state of Maine. And you need to look no further than states that have made a similar investment to that which we will be making, and the Harold Alfond Foundation is making, in expanding these programs. We also looked at making engineering graduate programs available at other campuses in our system, not just to have that available in Orono, but to make it available, for instance, in a portion of our state where a greater percentage of our population, the southern portion of the state, where many of our engineers are working, making laboratory experiences available in graduate programs to that a group of people who want to pursue those additional degrees. And then finally, and touched upon by a graduate of our law school, the Maine Graduate and Professional Center, and you can take the screen down now, we'll see a massive investment in that endeavor. You've heard about the success and the growth of the MBA program, but let me give you another number. In the next 12 months, we will see the graduation of over 200 MBA graduates or new graduates. Imagine that we have grown the program not just from the numbers of people sitting in a classroom or taking online that experience, that education, but we are about to see over the next 12 months 200 additional individuals graduate with a Maine MBA certificate or diploma. That speaks well, again, of our ability to forecast economic growth, because we know, again, that it's difficult to attract, in some cases, talent from other states to Maine. Although I have to say that the pandemic experience is proving that we are an attractive location, increasingly recognized therefore. But what we're attempting to do, and will now see us do in the very near future, is to make sure that the talent necessary to drive economic growth through a degree attainment and experience is going to be available and become available on a much broader basis than it has been before in our state. Looking at the class that's starting with us, we're talking about a class that has 9.5 years of experience already in the area that they're studying for a graduate degree. That's a tremendous testament to the quality of our program, the ability to attract people and to retain talent within the state of Maine, as well as attract additional talent we believe we can reasonably project. You've heard of the success, particularly with bar passage rates of the law school, and under the leadership of a new and wonderful Dean Lee Softly. Very proud of the endeavor there, and looking for a new home. Yes, a new roof for the MBA program, for the law program, as well as a very enlarged Muskie program having to do with master's degrees available in any number of areas. But we group that around the idea of service, as the senator himself spoke so eloquently of during his own service. The investment we're making in and around the Graduate Center to enlarge and continue the process of enlarging our programs, MBA, Muskie, and law, to have greater levels of accomplishment, to see as much of that talent remain or be available to the people of Maine is going to be very important. So we're talking about $105 million total expenditure to raise the numbers of students and the success in those programs. A total of $150 million in the engineering endeavor, and a total of $45 million to be spent in the area of retention and success. Put together, this is a massive investment over a 12-year period of time in not only our programs, but in the state of Maine. As the program that grants most of the doctorate degrees that are had in any given year in the state, a very large percentage of the master's degrees given in the state, and a very high percentage of the undergraduate baccalaureate degrees. We now look to seeing those numbers increase very substantially of homegrown talent. And I've just heard something ring, which probably tells me that my time for my comments are done. So let me conclude this way. Without the Harold Alphonse Foundation's investment in us, we would not be in the position to be making the kinds of investments in the future of Maine that we are prepared to make. And yes, we'll be out raising money, and yes, we'll be out having discussions with perhaps some of the people who are watching this presentation, but together we can guarantee a brighter day, a more fulfilling day, and more employment in the state of Maine in the very near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor. Your words are very encouraging, exciting, and as a former alumni, I'm looking forward to the future for sure. We're very, very proud of what you've been able to do. And speaking of together, there is no question that our state's economy, the preparation of our workforce, depends on that togetherness between the University of Maine and the community college. The community college has an incredible role to play in being able to prepare our people and meet the needs of the economy. I'm pleased that our president, Dave Dagler, is here to speak to that. So David, the floor, as they say, maybe there's a more appropriate term than the floor, but the panel that I see you on is all yours, so go for it.
We might say the screen as opposed to the floor these days. Thank you, Dana. First of all, just to back up a step, I really want to thank the Chamber, you, Dana, and everyone else for bringing this event to life in a virtual format. I can't imagine a more important conversation than the conversations we've had today, and the importance of those conversations as we look forward and try to build a strong and vital Maine economy. Now, if I'm to reflect on the power of the investments that have come through to the community colleges through the Harold Alphonse Foundation, I think what I have to do is really start with a quick summary of the day. And I'm cognizant of the fact that I'm now standing between our participants and lunch, so I will be brief. But I do want to go back to the very opening comments from Lori LaChance, where she talked about investing boldly. And then follow that up with comments from Senator Mellott about targeted investments and bold investments in money that help build Maine for the future. We heard from Yellow Green, and we know that we have the measures of growth and we have the benchmarks. I happen to believe that if we make proper investments as we go forward, we will have an opportunity to see those measures of growth leap off the page. We will go in many categories where we are challenged or struggling in New England to leaders in New England. Greg mentioned earlier that there are profound economic challenges, and there were profound economic challenges before the pandemic started. The pandemic has exacerbated some of those challenges, but it has also provided us with great opportunities. Senator Breen mentioned just one situation where we've really had changes in the nature of work, and that's with remote work. Senator Breen said we've been talking about remote work for 20 years. All of a sudden, in the last 10 months, we've figured out how to do it, and we're having conferences like this to do it. So those have provided us with tremendous opportunities. But we have to remember that there is a group of people that has been greatly disaffected by this pandemic. And those are the people that have been referred to earlier, the unemployed and the underemployed, those without the skills to succeed in the current economy. What we need to do in the community colleges is really increase access. We need to broaden the scope of people that we bring in. And we need to hasten the delivery of the benefits of skills and education that are received. We need to bring them to businesses faster. And if we're able to do that, we're able to move out of this pandemic-driven recession and really regain strength and growth. Now, there are 100 ideas in ways in which we can do that. But the most critical one has really, the foundation for that has been set by an investment from the Harold L. Fund Foundation. And that investment has provided us to really broaden our short-term workforce, our short-term training efforts that work directly with businesses. Most of that short-term training is actually customized to meet businesses' needs, individual businesses or trade associations or groups of businesses that come together with a common need. We meet those needs in short order. What we're now building is a platform that gives advanced skills, sometimes advanced technical skills, sometimes soft skills that have been lost in short-term training, and continue to develop the training and education that our citizenry needs. We look forward to a day where we're going to bring that trainee a portfolio and demonstrate to them that they have a path to a degree, a very short path to a degree, and many of those students will then move on to the university and Chancellor Malloy, who you've just heard from. It's important to note, and this is a frame of reference that Commissioner Johnson uses all the time. We need to invest in the spectrum, in the broad spectrum of our educational system. We need all of the resources to be hitting hard. But in order to succeed in this economy, a person needs a skill that they can rely on. Once they have that skill, they can get traction in the economy and they can move themselves up, and they will move themselves up. We've seen incredible instances where someone has gained skills and they've gained confidence and they've decided to move up and up and up. I referenced one of them in a speech I gave 2 years ago to the legislature, but it was a woman who was afraid to step into a community college classroom. And when I talked to her, she had set her sights on getting a PhD. So those are the kinds of students that we need to bring in, and we need to broaden the platform, and we need to find ways to bring them in. We were focused on the adults when we started this effort, but we're now realizing that there are students in our high schools who are also suffering during this pandemic. They're struggling with this Zoom type of instruction, and they want to work with their hands. They want to learn with their hands. They want to trade. We can provide them that trade, and we can do that in a short-term platform and then bring them into our classroom as they move forward. So those are the goals that we've set. And the investment from the Harold L. Foundation has really set the base for that. They made an investment, they gave us a gift, they allowed us to build out that infrastructure, they provided some direct training dollars and allowed us to leverage other training dollars and really expand the work that's happening in that arena. Our classrooms still need work. We need to expand our healthcare workforce. We need to pay attention to the climate change and make sure that we have a workforce that's ready to meet the needs of the climate initiatives that are coming forward. So Greg also mentioned the work of Focus Maine and how the Maine Community College system is integrated with the work that's taking place in economic development, and using Focus Maine as an example. We stepped up an aquaculture program to support that initiative. We're working with businesses in aquaculture now. And from that, we learned that one of our oldest heritage industries has a new need. This is another example of the changes in our economy. Logistics management has become very important to the lobstering industry so that they can get their products to the market faster and more efficiently. Those are examples of changes that are coming and have been accelerated as a result of the pandemic. So, Dana, I know you've got a crowd out there that really wants to get to lunch, and they may have some questions. I want to make sure that we provide opportunities for them to get their questions in. So I'm going to turn it back to you.
Well, thanks, Dave. And let me say on behalf of all of us, whether you're a viewer here today or whether you're people throughout the state who do not have the opportunity or the chance to be witness to what all three of you have offered our viewers. And that is to say, I can't help but feel very secure about the future. We all know that the success of our people as well as our economy depends on preparing people for that economy and focusing on education, supporting education, making sure it is strong, it is financially well positioned, and you have the right people in the right place at the right time. For all of that, we do, and for all of that, we're very thankful. The reason I'm not turning it to questions is they told me I am out of time. I'd love to have the opportunity to have people ask you questions, but at a later time. But for this, sincere thank you to all three. You are incredible in what you do and how you support our people and our economy. Thank you. Now I'm going to flip it over to our chair to close out today's program.
Well, thanks, everybody, and thanks for today's presentations. They've certainly left us and me with many things to consider and think about. We heard about the strategies and plans to help bring us out of the pandemic challenge. We heard and had a refocus on our state's strategic plan and how to reinvest our time and resources into that. And we also heard from Measures of Growth, which was a tool to use on how we are doing and how our investments are resulting in positive growth and identifying areas that we still need to focus on. It's always good to hear about our budgeting process and our bonding process, the possibilities and the priorities that are beginning to develop around those. Really rewarding to hear from our keynote today and to hear about two of the primary recipients of those monies. The success, I think we all can agree, lies greatly in the education of our workforce. So as we close today, we look forward to hearing back from you tomorrow. We look forward to hearing from legislative leadership and a panel of business leaders on the challenges and opportunities that they see. And we'll also have an opportunity to hear from our governor. Our governor will be here to take questions and answers after her presentation live, so we hope you join us. We'll see you then, and until then, have a great afternoon.